Come all you poor workers, good news to.
Just faked him out.
Come all you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old Union has come in here to dwell.
A battle in the heart of Alabama caught our attention. Coal miners in one community, they've been on strike now for months.
Working as long as 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, in some of the most dangerous conditions.
I really think that the labor movement is the single greatest force for democracy in the history of the United States.
The story of Alabama is a story of not just resilience, but of militancy.
I say no contract, you say no coal. No contract, no contract.
If we ain't all free, ain't none of us free.
You're listening to Alabama's only union talk radio show, The Valley Labor Report, with Adam Keller and Jacob Morrison.
Hello, Tennessee Valley. This is the Valley Labor Report. My name is Adam Keller, and we're broadcasting live online and on the radio from the heart of the Tennessee Valley, the Spice Radio Studio in Huntsville, Alabama. Today, Jacob has the day off. Congrats again on your wedding. So I'm joined by two special guest hosts this morning. We've got updates from the Department of Labor. We talk the good, the bad, and the ugly of Alabama politics and the legislative session. A lot of ugly there. And discuss some local stories here in the Tennessee Valley. And in overtime, we're talking to AFGE about the debt limit. All that and more on today's Valley Labor Report. If you want to be part of the program today, we've got a phone number and the line is open. You can call or text 844-899-TVLR. That's 844-899-8857. You can send us a text. You can leave us a voicemail throughout the week, and we'll check that out. I think we do have a couple voicemails for us to check, so looking forward to hearing that. If you haven't gotten enough of us by the time we wrap our hour and a half here on the radio, or if you just want to see what we're up to throughout the week, you can find us online. Anywhere you can find anything online at the Valley Labor Report. And a reminder that your support keeps us on the air. Our largest single source of funding comes directly from our listeners, and we truly, truly appreciate you. If you want to become a sustaining member of the program, make a one-time donation or buy our new merch, like our shirts that just came in a couple weeks ago. You can go to tvlr.fm, or you can go to patreon.com/the Valley Labor Report. And if you're a member of a union, you should talk to your local about sponsoring the show. We're always looking for new advertisers, and if your union would like to get a message out to union allies and activists across the Tennessee Valley and across the South, hit us up. And not just unions, but if you have a union print shop, if you have a nonprofit organization or a media outlet, political organization, any kind of club or entity or union-friendly business that might want to advertise with us, just let us know. And also want to add a disclaimer that any viewpoints or opinions expressed in this program belong solely to their author and do not necessarily represent any organization or sponsor. We welcome all of our listeners, whether you're on YouTube, Facebook, WVNN, WZZA, WHIV, or through your favorite podcast app. We are proud to be part of the Labor Radio Podcast Network, and we encourage our listeners to check that out. And I really appreciate y'all tuning in this morning. It's a little bit of a different episode because, as I mentioned at the top, Jacob is off today. Our fearless leader, who's typically here in the lead role. So I'm stepping up in the lead role this morning. I have two special guests with me. First, we have returning is Ben Job, Spice Radio extraordinaire.
What's up, y'all? Happy to be here this fine morning. I got my threads on, the union threads.
Absolutely.
Check out I don't have the new one though. The new one's like it's even better, y'all. It keeps getting better. So grab those threads.
Check it out. So appreciate Ben being here with us, and also have with me Tahira Osborne. Welcome.
Hey, I'm just an organizer, an activist, and all-around general rabble-rouser based here in Huntsville.
Absolutely, and you have been a long-time activist. I've seen you around pretty much every protest I've ever been to, or organizing meeting. She's been there, and she has also been a big help to the Valley Labor Report. So we really appreciate you, and appreciate you joining this morning and sitting in with us.
Yeah, happy to be here this morning.
So we've got a lot to talk about today. We don't have any guest in the main show today. We do have a guest in overtime, so you'll want to stay tuned for that. There was just so much news to talk about, especially here in Alabama. But before we get to the local and state stories, I did want to mention a couple of updates from the Department of Labor that I did not want to go unnoticed. So last Sunday was Mother's Day, and we hope all the mothers and mother figures had a great day. It's worth remembering that Mother's Day originated as a call for international peace by mothers tired of seeing their sons and husbands killed in war. Calls for improved public health were also a big part of the original efforts. And on the subject of Mother's Day, I wanted to highlight this recent release from the Department of Labor. A U.S. Department of Labor report finds the impact of caregiving on mothers' wages reduces lifetime earnings by 15%. So U.S. Department of Labor and elected federal officials held a media briefing on May 11th to discuss the release of a report by the department's Women's Bureau on how caring for family has long-term impacts on a mother's lifetime earnings. Women's Bureau Director Wendy Shunhoon and U.S. Representatives Gwen Moore, Susan Wild, and Chantel Brown shared findings from their report called Lifetime Employment-Related Costs to Women of Providing Family Care. Women's Bureau Senior Advisor Sarah Jane Glenn also took part in the briefing. The report finds the amount of time women spend providing essential care to children and adults has a substantial personal economic cost that continues long after the caregiving ends. The estimated employment-related cost for mothers providing unpaid care averages $295,000 over a lifetime, based on the U.S. dollar value of 2021. Unpaid family caregiving reduces a mother's lifetime earnings by 15%, which also, of course, creates a reduction in retirement income. Families often think first of immediate demands out of necessity. Children, aging loved ones, and people with disabilities need care right now. And when that care is needed during working hours, or is too expensive or inaccessible, it is the mothers who usually scale back on paid work to provide care, explained Women's Bureau Director Wendy Shunhoon. This report shows that lacking the necessary care infrastructure and safety net affects more than those immediate moments. They continue throughout a woman's life. Unpaid caregiving is work and should be recognized as such. This report is another reminder of the long-term costs women incur by providing unpaid care, and it cannot go ignored, said Congresswoman Gwen Moore. I'm working to ensure our federal policies support those providing unpaid care to loved ones, uplifting women and their families so we can build an equitable, modern economy. Women spend invaluable time providing compassionate, dedicated care for their children and family members, and their reduced lifetime earnings because of it illustrate just how important solving the child care crisis is, said Congresswoman Susan Wild. The lack of accessible, affordable child care in Pennsylvania impacts our economy to the tune of more than $6 billion per year, harming working moms and working families' ability to earn more and get ahead. The report is also a call to action. All families should have access to affordable child care if we want to have an inclusive economy, said Congresswoman Chantel Brown. Families across the nation and from all demographics are struggling with high child care costs. This financial burden is especially high in historically marginalized communities, including Black mothers, as they are the least likely to scale back employment after having children due to challenging economic conditions. A lack of affordable care puts so much pressure on families Black women deserve the ability to build wealth and build a family. Our children, mothers, and families in Northeast Ohio deserve better. Again, that's from Congresswoman Shontel Brown. So this also is likely a conservative estimate. This reduction of 15%. It's likely that that's actually an underestimate of the cost of caregiving on a woman's earnings throughout their life. And I think this is important research and an important reminder of the sacrifices made by mothers and caregivers and how far we still have to go towards equity. So thank you again to all the mothers, and in the original spirit of Mother's Day, let us move forward together to advance international peace and the health care of all of our families.
Amen to that.
Yeah, absolutely appreciate the Department of Labor putting that out, timing it with Mother's Day. Very cool. The results of the report, not so cool. Definitely don't want to hear that by just being a mother, your earnings are going to be reduced.
Yeah.
But it makes sense. And I think about, the mother of my child, my own wife, who, in her case, it took her years to recover her sick leave, right? She had to take so much of her sick leave between pregnancy and childbirth. And of course, when you have a little one, they get sick a lot. They have to go to appointments a lot. And I mean, she's lucky that she had paid sick leave, right? Not all workers have that. So really important research from the Department of Labor.
I would like to point out that pregnancy and having children is also not sickness. The fact that we have to use sick care in order to be able to provide care for our children is itself a problem.
Right, absolutely. Absolutely. And there's a lack of paid family and medical leave in this country, which is really a unique thing to this country. Most families across the globe get some form of paid family and medical leave, right? But we do not in the United States of America. And even, again, sticking with the example of my wife, who is a teacher, public school teachers in Alabama don't get maternity leave. And this is a profession that is roughly 80% female, right? It's wild. And if anyone should understand the importance of family and the importance of mothers being with their children, it's educators. So, that's just an example, but definitely something that we have to be cognizant of in our labor movement and the ways in which inequities still play out across gender roles. And the next update I had from the Department of Labor is actually about our mining brothers and sisters. So the U.S. Department of Labor held its inaugural Stand Down to Save Lives to promote and emphasize miner safety and health and stop the rise in miner fatalities. The U.S. Department of Labor announced last week that the Mine Safety and Health Administration, MSHA, would hold its first Stand Down to Save Lives on May 17th as part of a national campaign to encourage the nation's mining community to take steps to prevent injuries and illnesses and stop an alarming rise in the number of miners killed on the job in 2023. So far this year, 18 miners have suffered fatal workplace injuries at U.S. mines, 6 more than at this same point in time last year. These fatal incidents have involved vehicle collisions, electrocutions, falls from elevated surfaces, equipment rollovers, and drowning. As part of the event, MSHA is calling on the industry to increase its focus on training, workplace examinations, and other safety and health requirements designed to protect miners. The agency encourages the entire mining community, miners, operators, and unions to set aside time during the week of May 15th through 19th to stress the importance of safety and health in and around U.S. mines. On May 17th, MSHA leadership visited mines in Maryland and Virginia to stress the importance of safety in the workplace. Federal law holds mine owners and operators responsible for proper training, adequate personal protective equipment, and safe operation of equipment and machinery. The event follows an April 14, 2023 open letter from Assistant Secretary for Mine Safety and Health, Chris Williamson, to the entire mining community, in which he urged everyone to work together and stay vigilant to prevent accidents and fatalities. The Mine Safety and Health Administration's inaugural Stand Down to Save Lives continues our education and outreach efforts to reduce fatalities, serious injuries, and illnesses in the mining industry, said the Assistant Secretary Chris Williamson. Miners are safer and healthier than when the entire mining community works together, and we encourage everyone to dedicate time and resources to focus on protecting the nation's miners. As part of the campaign, MSHA has established a Stand Down to Save Lives webpage with resources for the mining community, including a toolkit for participants to use during the events. With best safety and health practices in mind, the agency asked mine operators and miners to focus on the following. Owners and operators, how can you improve safety and health programs, maintenance of equipment, and hazard reporting to make them more effective? Supervisors and managers, how can you improve training and workplace examinations? Have you addressed any concerns raised prior to your shift? And miners, do you have properly fitted personal protective equipment, and are you fully trained on any equipment you're operating? Another resource to assist miners is MSHA's Miner Safety and Health app, which provides timely information directly to miners and others in the mining community. The app allows users to review and understand miners' rights and responsibilities, search and use best safety and health practices, and receive notifications of mining accidents and how to prevent them. And the free app is available in both English and Spanish for Android and iPhone. And you can search Miner Safety and Health at the app stores. So I would add to this press release from the Department of Labor to say, you know, they addressed miners, they addressed the managers, they addressed the owners. What about government? Where's MSHA calling itself out and reminding itself to be more aggressive in its enforcement and regulation? And of course, they need funding to do that. And like many agencies across government that's meant to protect workers, there's not enough staff there to do the job adequately. So that would be my 2 cents to add into that. And of course, on this note of talking about the miners and their safety, we want to extend our love and solidarity with the UMWA brothers and sisters down in Brookwood, who are still fighting for the fair contract they deserve from Warrior Met Coal.
And I might add on to that point, if you go to ALreporter.com, the Alabama Political Reporter, they have a newer article that we are in the top 10 of the most deadly places to work in the U.S. of A. So we're number 7, apparently, with a 5.5% fatality rate out of 100K. So, yeah,
just
real issues.
Yeah, another case of Alabama bringing up the rear. And, you know, Jacob and I talked a little bit about this with Workers' Memorial Day and some of the information the AFL-CIO has put out. And in fact, in that Alabama Political Reporter article, our own Jacob Morrison is quoted in that article.
Oh, yeah, I forgot he is on that article, too.
Yeah, as is
working together.
A local legislator, Anthony Daniels. And I just encourage you to check out that article and see for yourself what Jacob had to say, but also see for yourself what Representative Daniels had to say, and get back to us on your thoughts about that. So moving on, I did want to mention a little bit about what we have coming up in overtime, because we do have a great guest coming. Right now, we're in our main show, which airs live on WVNN in the Athens-Huntsville listening area and is rebroadcast on WZZA in the Shoals and WHIV out of New Orleans. In case you didn't know, we have an entire second half of the program called Overtime starting at 11 a.m., live streamed on our Facebook and YouTube channels at the Valley Labor Report. While our main show tends to have more of a local Tennessee Valley and Alabama focus, in Overtime we broaden the scope to discuss more national and international stories, respond to corporate media, and plenty of other things. And of course, OT is a little looser since it's online only and free of the FCC censors, so we can use the curse words on there. It's always fun. And sometimes the things we talk about will make you want to cuss. So both halves of our Saturday show are released as podcasts on your favorite apps a couple days later, alongside our Thursday morning series called Shop Talk, which is dedicated to labor education, history, and training. Had a great interview with a brother from the Teamsters this week, Jason Ide, who talked all about what to do when you actually win particularly, if you win union office. So I thought it was a great interview. So y'all check that out. Shop Talk airs every Thursday. And throughout the week, segments and interviews are actually clipped and released as YouTube videos. So if there's something in particular that you missed or you're curious about, we do try to make it easy to find. And all of this content is for free, which we can do thanks to our great advertisers and the generous donations of listeners like you. So today in Overtime, we'll be talking with Jackie Simon, who is Public Policy Director with AFGE, about the debt limit crisis, what it means for government workers like their members, and what it means for all of us across the country. To give you a preview, I wanted to play this digital ad that AFGE has been running. Ben, can you cue that up for us?
Yeah, give me just a sec and we'll have that.
What happens if Congress fails to raise the debt ceiling? The Treasury Department is already using extraordinary measures to meet our obligations. Further delay could endanger funding for critical programs like Social Security, Medicare, veterans benefits, border security, federal prisons, and the U.S. military, and even delay your tax refund. Join together with 750,000 workers represented by the American Federation of Government Employees. Click here to contact Congress today and tell them to protect these critical programs and the American people. Tell them to raise the debt ceiling now. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
So that's an idea of AFGE's message right now when it comes to the debt limit crisis. So stay tuned at 11 o'clock in Overtime for our interview with AFGE Public Policy Director Jackie Simon for a more in-depth discussion. And with that, we're going to go to our very first short commercial break. And when we return, we're going to go back to Montgomery for a legislative update. So stay tuned.
IBW 558 is like a great football team. You've got to have the aptitude, skills, and knowledge to outperform the competition. If you're a non-union electrician, now is the perfect time to get off the sideline and join our team. We have the absolute best wages and benefit package in North Alabama and Southern Tennessee. It's because our team stands together, bargains together, and our families benefit from it. With immediate openings, you have the opportunity to see why the IBW is the right choice.
Support for the Valley Labor Report comes from the International Federation of Professional and Technical Engineers Union. Learn more by visiting www.ifpte.org.
The attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs have stood with the working people of Alabama for over 40 years, providing skilled legal representation for your workplace injury claims. When you are injured on the job, it can be a scary time. The attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs have the experience to guide you through the process to make sure that you and your family are properly taken care of and your rights are protected. If you need help, call the attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs at 855-617-9333 or visit online at www.mtnj.com. No representation is made that the quality of legal services provided is greater than the quality of legal services provided by other law firms.
Support for this program comes from the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local 136 out of Central Alabama. Learn more at ibew136.org.
Attention union members, membership organizations, podcasters, or anyone with a payment processing need. The future is here, and your organization needs to be prepared by working with Unionly. With Unionly, your union or organization can take payments on a mobile device, eliminating processing fees, giving you a better price than other payment processing methods, while at the same time supporting a union-friendly business with a specialized skill set to meet your needs. Your members will thank you when they pay their dues at their convenience without waiting in line to deposit cash or check. Start preparing for the future today by calling 206-595-8631 or visiting unionly.io.
Are you looking for a better future, a career that can have you set for life, and to be a part of something that's bigger than yourself? If you are, then consider a skilled trades apprenticeship with the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades. The work of IUPAT is all around us, from the industrial painters who work on the bridges to drywall finishers, floor coverers, the glazers who install the glass in our skylines, and so much more. With an IUPAT apprenticeship, you earn while you learn and receive benefits while learning the trade, including a pension. We provide world-class education free of charge. That's right, no student debt. Our starting salaries for apprentices that graduate is above the national median salary with benefits for entire families. And you have the flexibility to take your trade wherever you'd like in the country to work. IUPAT District Council 77 covers our entire region, so give Adam Booth a call at 205-603-3142 for more information. Again, that phone number is 205-603-3142. Come build a better future with us today and join IUPAT.
The sign hit the city like a bolt of lightning.
You know the photo. It's iconic. Marches in the streets holding a simple sign with a simple message.
I am a man.
The I Am Story podcast explores the fight that inspired those words, how a group of sanitation workers in Memphis stood up and made history.
They don't see us as men and women.
Go to IamStory.com or wherever you get your podcasts to subscribe.
I'm attorney Tommy Sinyard. When you've been injured and need help, you need a lawyer who's with you.
Sinyard Law. You need attorneys always available to take care of you. Sinyard Law.
And keep you in the loop. It's your case. You need to know what's happening.
Sinyard Law. And never a charge to meet with us to evaluate your case. Sinyard Law.
A new firm, but an old name. One that will stay with you every step of the way.
Sinyard Law. The name with proven results.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell. How the good old union has come in here to dwell.
Labor creates all wealth. All wealth should go to labor. And you're listening to the Valley Labor Report. My name is Adam Keller. My typical co-host, Jacob Morrison, has the day off today, so Tahira and Ben are joining me here in Spice Radio Studio. If you have anything to add, you can give us a call or send us a text. The phone number is 844-899-TVLR. And hey, just a little not-so-fun fact for you. Did you know that billionaires gave over $1 billion in the 2022 midterm election, according to new reporting that just came out? Yeah, I just wanted to throw that out there while we move on to our legislative updates. We're going to be talking all the good, the bad, and the ugly coming out of Montgomery. And let's start with LGBT rights. On Tuesday, May 16th, hundreds of demonstrators attended a march for LGBTQ rights in downtown Montgomery. The event was put on by LGBTQ Action. The march started at the Alabama Supreme Court and ended at the State House. And this comes on the heels of a large demonstration here in Huntsville last Sunday. And we're going to hear more about that in a moment. So organizers put together the march because they said, quote, legislators are attacking our trans community in sports, education, training, public conversations and spaces, and now through drag bans as a means to criminalize gender expression. Organizers asked allies to attend the march, study the legislation, and reach out to their legislators. Organizers pointed to multiple bills before the Alabama legislature. HB 405, the so-called What is a Woman Act, which they said will erase trans, intersex, and non-binary identities. HB 401 is the so-called drag ban, labeling drag performances as quote-unquote obscene under the law, which comes with all sorts of restrictions. HB 354 is the so-called Don't Say Gay bill, which would prohibit any classroom instruction or even discussion related to gender identity or sexual orientation in public schools K through 8. HB 7, which I spoke about last week, is the so-called Divisive Concepts Bill, which would prevent honest conversations about history, racism, bias, homophobia, and transphobia. HB 312 is another Divisive Concepts Bill, which prohibits training and education at both the K-12 and higher ed levels and allows educators to be disciplined or terminated for discussing any so-called divisive topics. And then HB 261 is the anti-trans athlete bill, which applies to 2-year and 4-year colleges. So before I get into some details about the Divisive Concepts bill, Tahira, you were there. Give us a picture of the event.
Well, I attended the demonstration on Sunday here in Huntsville. We had really excellent turnout. Over 200 people showed up.
Wow.
Really positive response. Lots of youth, lots of families, which is exactly what we want to see. We want our families in the area to feel seen and feel supported. I really want to give a shout out to the Alabama Trans Rights Action Coalition, ALTRAC. You can check them out at altrac.works. They have been doing really excellent work getting legislators engaged, getting people matched up with their legislators, helping people figure out even what they want to say.
Right.
As well as analyzing these bills really, really deeply. The 405 What is a Woman Act is not just about defining what is a man or a woman, but actually turns us back in time, right? So even people who have successfully gotten their gender marker change, have transitioned socially, have transitioned medically, and have established their new identity under 405, all of that work could be undone.
Wow, I didn't realize that.
So it's actually putting a huge number of people at risk. It's not just about changes moving forward. It's about turning the clock back.
Right. And that just seems so punitive and nasty and mean-spirited, in my opinion.
Well, that's because it is ultimately about not wanting to see certain people in public.
Right. It's very... The only thing that's obscene to me is the bullying that's coming out of the Alabama legislature. And I wanted to highlight something from AO.com's article a few weeks back about the Divisive Concepts Bill, because I think it's pretty revealing about the mindset we're talking about here. In a recent interview with Right Side Radio, Representative Ed Oliver, who is the sponsor of this Divisive Concepts Bill, Oliver claimed the critical race theory, quote, sexualized and racialized children. In previous discussions about his bill, he claimed teachers were, quote, proselytizing children to become socialist and communist. Wow. He would not give specific examples of such lessons, naturally.
Because they don't exist.
Right. Who knew little Johnny was being converted to communism at their local public school? Ed Oliver knew. He says, ultimately, the reason that the left wants to push CRT amongst little kids is simply they want to sexualize them. They want to racialize them at an early age to make them easy to manage, pure and simple, he said. I hate to say a way to create more left-wingers that are woke. It will do the things that the left wants them to do, but that's exactly what it is, to divide people, to make groups fight each other so they're easier to manage. That is what a state legislator thinks teachers are doing in our schools.
Seems like the pot calling kettle black to me.
Yeah, I mean, if anyone is being divisive, right? I mean, to say that teachers and leftists want to sexualize children, that's what he thinks of educators.
And I will point out, the people that the most times I've heard the term sexualized, it's been on the right-wing radio. Like, it's incessant. It's always about trans. It's always about sexualization of children. It's just, they're just stuck on it, man.
It does seem
they're stuck on it.
It does seem to be an obsession. And it's insulting to educators to insinuate that's what they're doing in our public school classrooms. And, it's also clearly what he thinks of the left. And just, by the way, for the record, most leftists I've ever known, and I mean real leftists, not liberals, which the right frequently and falsely conflates as the same, despite our major differences, most leftists I've ever known are kind-hearted people who want a better world for all. More cooperation, more solidarity, more care, more dignity, more respect, and a real concern for the least of these. And I don't think I can say that about Representative Ed Oliver. Maybe it's projection, because I think of some folks and some churches who are proselytizing and sexualizing children, and they certainly aren't leftists. Just like I can think of some legislators who want to send public tax dollars to these very same churches. It's also projection because dividing people by race and gender and other identities, making groups fight each other so they're easier to control, is exactly what folks like Representative Oliver do, and exactly what those of us actually on the left oppose.
I would also just like to point out these are the same churches that are marrying children to adults.
Right.
The vast majority of child marriages that happen in the U.S. happen in evangelical churches.
Now, is that what he means by sexualizing children and proselytizing? I don't think so. But we, on the left, are opposed to dividing people by race and gender and identity. We stand for solidarity, not bigotry. We recognize that we as working people are the majority and that we have common interest in a more just, equitable, democratic society. We don't look down on people because of their race or their gender or orientation or ability or nationality or other aspects of a person. And you know, if this is the kind of stuff that Representative Ed Oliver is saying on the radio, I'd love to know what he says behind closed doors when he's among his like-minded friends. I mean, how wild must it be if that's what he's saying in public?
Yeah, we had a great YouTube comment from Jeb here, and what we're speaking about, he was saying, all things Adam just listed is about to cost North Alabama literally tens of thousands of jobs when the Space Force moves to Colorado instead of Huntsville, which has been cited from the administration, I believe, the anti-trans laws, bathroom bills, stuff like that is...
the abortion laws, yeah, absolutely. And yeah, we're going to be talking about Space Command later in the show when we talk a little bit of Tennessee Valley updates. But that's a great point, Jeb, and you're absolutely right. It's a national disgrace. And, you know, obviously the Alabama Republicans in the legislature have been very busy targeting LGBTQ folks to the extent that even acknowledging their existence in the wrong setting can get you in trouble. In my eyes, it is mean-spirited bullying against a small minority, partly as a cheap way to score political points, and partly as an expression of fundamentalist religion and other reactionary ideology. I also think it's a reaction to the increased acceptance of LGBTQ folks in our society, particularly among young people. It's an attack on freedom and human rights, and of course, it is a way to divide working class folks against one another while they pick our pockets and profit off our labor. As always, I come back to the answer is bigotry. The answer to bigotry is solidarity. An injury to one is an injury to all. We must reject the use of legislation to target marginalized folks in our community. We can't fall for divisive culture war that tries to pit straight folks against queer folks, just like we can't fall for the racism that tries to pit white folks against black folks, or the nativism that tries to pit native-born against immigrants. The overwhelming, vast majority of the population are working class, and we have more in common as fellow members of the working class than we have differences. You don't have to fully understand everything about gender or sexual orientation to know that we should treat every human being with dignity and respect. Lord knows I don't understand everything. I'm a straight white guy born and raised in the South, and that obviously limits my perspective. I don't know what it's like to be LGBTQ, and I never will. But I do have gay and trans loved ones, friends, co-workers, and comrades, and chances are, if you're listening, you do too. There's no need to fear or attack what you don't understand. Just let people live their lives. Be kind, and reflect on how our society treats the least of these among us.
And there's a lot of time being spent on a tiny minority of our population, targeting them with these ads with these laws when we're, you know, in the top 10 most deadliest place to work. Our education system is extremely low ranked. Like they could pretty much choose any kind of topic to advance Alabama, but they spend their time and energy and our money really on legislating a tiny minority of people and trying to tell teachers how to teach. Like they're not gonna. I don't see any of these senators or legislatures lining up for sub duty at a public school.
Right.
It's a hard job and it doesn't get paid near enough. And I don't think heaping arbitrary rules is going to end up helping our education system in the least bit myself. But.
Right. I mean, instilling fear in educators, and that's what this is about, right? It's instilling fear about what you can and can't say, what you can and can't teach, for dare not offend certain conservative elements. And that's scary.
I would also like to say it's about making queer and gender nonconforming people feel alienated and alone.
Mm-hmm.
It is making sure that kids who are coming up through the system never see anybody who is like them, never verbalize the feelings that they are struggling with inside of them, never see any representation, never know the possibilities that are out before them.
Right.
Right? It is about making sure that you stay in a box.
Yeah, I mean, to the extent that, like, you're not even supposed to see yourself reflected in a book, as if that's somehow damaging to children.
Never mind yourself. What about your family?
Right. It's just mean-spirited to attack families like this, and some of the bills that are coming out in Alabama and across the country, really. Florida is doing some of the same stuff. It's obviously a concerted effort, and like you said, Ben, it's a priority that they have made. When Alabama ranks at or near the bottom on every single quality of life metric that you can measure, you name it, we're at or near the bottom. You want me to believe LGBTQ folks are the reason we're so poor? The reason our schools are struggling? The reason our jails are overfilled? Give me a damn break. And while we're talking about what's happening in the state capitol, let's check in with our friends from Alabama Arise for their legislative update that they had at the start of the week. And that'll get us going, transition into some other legislation happening in Montgomery. Ben, can you play that for us?
Yes, indeed.
Hi, my name is Akeisha Anderson, and I serve as Policy and Advocacy Director for Alabama Arise. I'm excited to be here today to talk to you about what happened at the Alabama State House last week, the week of May 8th. So last week, there were several pieces of legislation that moved, some pieces that we are concerned about, some pieces that we are excited about. So we will begin with the bad news. So last week in the Senate, two pieces of legislation that have the ability to advance this seemingly goal of defunding public education did advance through committee. So SB 202, which is the PRICE Act, has the ability to divert about $600 million out of the Education Trust Fund by giving parents money to essentially send their children to schools alternatives other than public schools. And so that is a piece of legislation that Alabama Rise is closely watching and is in opposition to. Similarly, the Alabama Accountability Act, which was passed years ago, is back before the legislature, this time seeking to be amended to raise the cap by about $20 million of the amount of money that can possibly be spent under this act. So that is a total of about $620 million that could possibly be diverted out of the Education Trust Fund to parents enabling them to send their children to schools other than public schools. And so those are pieces of legislation that Arise is very concerned about and that we are closely monitoring as well as we are opposing. On the brighter side, there was some good news this past week. So several pieces of legislation related to criminal justice reform were either up in committee this past week or slated to be voted on this past week. So let's start with SB 154, which is the driver's license bill. This piece of legislation was slated to be voted on Thursday. Unfortunately, the legislature adjourned right before getting to this bill, but the good news is it is slated to be voted on Tuesday of this week. So hopefully within just a few days, a few hours, the driver's license legislation will become law or will pass out of the legislature. So if you don't recall, SB 154 is the piece of legislation that will stop the automatic practice of suspending driver's licenses for unpaid traffic tickets, fines, and fees. And so That is something that Alabama Rise is in support of. That is something that we are closely monitoring and that we hope to see get over the finish line this week. Another really good piece of criminal justice legislation, HB 229, is a second chance bill for short. And this is a piece of legislation that will allow people that have been sentenced to life without parole under our 3 strikes law to have the ability to petition a court to be resentenced for a shorter amount of time. So that means that many people, hundreds of people that are serving life in prison, which is the second worst consequence other than the death penalty, these people will have the chance to possibly be resentenced for time served, or, for have the ability to serve less time, and prove that we are all more than the worst thing we have ever done. So these are pieces of legislation that we are excited about. We hope to see them continue to move, and as they move, we will continue to keep you posted and updated on them. So if you do not already, please be sure to make sure that you pay attention to our bills of interest on our website. You can find that at alarise.org, and please pay attention to our action alerts and help us contact legislators throughout the week, just on a host of different issues. So thank you so much. Take care.
All right, y'all. Yeah, I really appreciate the work Alabama Rise is doing. Definitely check out their bills of interest section on their website. It's a great way to monitor the legislation. So we're going to talk about a couple bills here. I've got a couple to hear. It's got some really startling information about a bill that's passing through the legislature. I do want to shout out Alabama Appleseed Center for Law and Justice for their work to end debt-based driver's license suspensions, which impacts too many of our fellow working people. As you heard there is a bill that's going to address that. And I think there's good news on that, right?
Yes. So SB 154 has officially passed both houses, and the Senate has even done their concurrence.
Nice.
So it is now headed to the governor's desk for signature.
Awesome. Yeah, I was going to ask y'all to contact your state rep and senator, but that has already passed through. That is great.
So contact Ivy. Contact Ivy's office and let her know you support this legislation.
Absolutely, yeah. Hit up the governor, let her know her signature is needed for that bill. I think it's a very important bill because Alabama has been suspending the driver's license of anyone who cannot afford to pay a traffic ticket or anyone who misses a court hearing.
Jeez. And that includes not just criminal court,
right?
Importantly. So that also includes civil cases. That also includes things like child support or child supervision hearings. Now, if you are somebody who cannot afford to pay your child support and you're getting pulled over and you find out your license has been suspended and your car is getting towed and you have another ticket you've got to take care of, how are you now supposed to get to work, and how are you supposed to afford that care? How are you supposed to afford that support?
Yeah,
if you can't work, if you can't get to work, how are you supposed to take care of these fees?
Yeah, we've got to the point where we can't even exist to feed the machine at a certain point because they won't let people out of jail long enough to work to feed the machine that they created.
Extraction is their primary objective.
Right.
That extraction is their primary objective.
Right. And how is this keeping people safer to take their driver's license away over a missed traffic ticket or, unpaid child support, unpaid civil court fees? It's taking away people's legal right to operate a vehicle in a state like Alabama where we have no public transportation really of any significance.
I think Arise now has their transport coalition, and they estimate that something like 16% of Alabamians do not have access to regular transportation.
Wow. And I bet you if you take a look at that 16% and then look at the poverty rate in the state, there's going to be a lot of crossover there, right? Because It's so difficult to survive in Alabama without transportation. And that's why public transportation is such a critical need in our state. And it's why, backwards policies like this of taking away 170,000 people, their driver's license, 170,000 people, that's a lot of people. And 95% of all suspended licenses in the state are because of unpaid traffic ticket debt, not because of driving, malfeasance, not because they did something wrong on the roads and are like an unsafe driver. No, it's because they have debt. So that is good news. I'm actually glad to hear the good news that this bill has passed both chambers. It's headed to the governor. So hit up the governor, let her know you want that signed. good to see a little bit of progress. From a good bill back to a bad one, though, HB 209 is still working its way through the legislature. This is the bill that would criminalize assistance with absentee voting. I put out a statement with the Alabama Voting Rights Coalition recently asking all union brothers and sisters to join me in opposing this bill, which is anti-democratic voter suppression based on an imaginary problem. And we should not risk a felony by helping people exercise their rights. Really hoping this bill can be defeated, and I appreciate the Alabama Voting Rights Coalition, League of Women Voters Alabama, and everyone else who's been fighting this terrible legislation. And there is a public hearing on Tuesday, May 23rd, so there's still time to stop this bad bill. And then there's, did you have an update on the voting rights bill?
I just wanted to say I want people to understand that this voting rights bill criminalizes even simply taking a sealed stamp envelope and putting it in a mailbox for somebody else.
It is wild. I mean, a piece of paper can become illegal under this act. Helping people, giving someone a ride.
Helping someone read the form.
And I think if you missed our interview a week or two back, we talked to someone from Faith in Action Alabama, and we also talked to a student at the University of Alabama about how this would criminalize the work they're doing. And the gentleman from Faith in Action Alabama, Mr. Clark, he had a great point that at the end of the day, this is criminalizing helping people. And since when should we ever do that? So definitely calling on folks to join me in opposing HB 209. We've got to protect our right to vote, folks. But there's more bad legislation, unfortunately. There's the anti-loitering bill, which would further criminalize homeless folks and other things. So you've got some updates there.
So I have actually been in the State House talking to some legislators about HB 24. I have been emailing committees to talk about HB 24. So what HB 24 does is it amends the existing public loitering statute, which is already unconstitutional, by the way, because it criminalizes panhandling. So people who are in public rights of way and are actively soliciting for money. Right? That's panhandling. What HB 24 does is take the panhandling component out of the bill and allows officers to arrest people just because they exist in a public right of way.
Wow.
That means your right to picket.
Right.
If you're blocking a sidewalk, if you are blocking an entrance, that is a reason to arrest you for loitering. If you are in a protest and you're participating in a march, if you're exercising your First Amendment rights, that's a reason to pick you up. If you are unsheltered and you are just trying to sit in the shade for a little while and minding your own business, that is a reason to pick you up and take you to jail.
That is just wild. I mean, and it kind of reminds me of the anti-riot bill we were dealing with last year that thankfully failed. And here's yet another attempt to criminalize protest and freedom of assembly, while also targeting, the most marginalized folks in our community, the folks who are without any shelter, right?
And I want to make it clear, the lawmakers who are introducing this bill and pushing this bill through know that it's unconstitutional. They've been told it's unconstitutional. They want that fight.
Right. They want to spend your tax dollars fighting this out in the courts. And, as we've talked about on the show before, Alabama legislators have never been deterred by the constitutionality of their own legislation. And I think that's a good point that, in some cases they welcome that fight and they want to bring it to the courts. They want to be on TV, right? They want to be on WVNN, right-wing radio. They want to be in right-wing media, glowing up about this, this fight that they're taking to the courts, all to hurt people. It's a mean-spirited piece of legislation.
Yeah, I don't know if you mentioned, I was looking at the comments, but if you're wearing a mask and you are congregating in a public place or loiter or remain in a public place, you can be under this law, I guess, arrested or so. So that's interesting. Masks are pretty common these days. And just being in public in a mask should not be in the law here.
Right.
I don't think.
And so I want to point out this is why the work that we've been doing on SB 13 is so important. HB 13, sorry, excuse me, let me get the bill number right, which is our summons in lieu of arrest bill.
Okay.
We want to make sure that whenever we can let people go with simply a summons and not have to put them under custodial arrest, that is what officers are doing. We do not need to keep filling up our jail. So I find it really interesting that the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing when it comes to these kinds of policies, right? Because HB 13 is driven by police, actually. It's driven by the jails who know that we are filling up, who know that we are unnecessarily arresting people.
Right, they can't handle
don't want the
problem.
Escalation.
Right.
They don't want the cost to the taxpayers of keeping these people incarcerated for nothing.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, it's the idea that you can't wear a mask and gather in a public place. Well, why might you wear a mask? Well, you could wear a mask because you're worried about disease, right? We just went through a pandemic. Or you could be wearing a mask just because of the hell of it, right? Because you can, because you're in America and you should be able to wear a mask if you want to wear a mask.
Because we're in the middle of pollen season.
Right. We're in pollen season. I have terrible allergies, okay? I'm not the only one. Why else would you wear a mask? Well, I don't know. Maybe if you're at a demonstration of some kind, particularly in a place like Alabama, and you're on the more progressive side of things, well, there might be some folks on the other side of the aisle documenting you being there to try to dox you, to try to get you terminated at your job. There could be, far-right lunatics who do monitor protests and gatherings to document left-wing activists. That's a real phenomenon. That really happens. And so there are plenty of reasons why someone might want to wear a mask and gather in a public place. And it's just, it's anti-freedom.
Yeah, and I've got the bill pulled up here. And some of the defenders will say, well, they're giving tools to law enforcement to help people off the street. And there's a section that specifically says an officer may instruct any person in violation of the subdivision to peaceably exit. And they may drive them to a shelter if they feel like it. I guess they can still arrest them as well.
They may or may not.
If they may arrest them. And then
they may ruin your life. They may help you.
Gotta protect that officer discretion, man.
I guess before this law, they didn't have the option to help you at all, apparently. So I'm glad they codified it that a cop may not have to arrest you for this stuff. But and the other one I wanted to mention was they will not. One section of the bill: no person shall stand in the roadway in the purpose of soliciting a ride. So no hitchhiking. Don't try and get around for free. Of course, it is dangerous to be on a highway or any street, but this covers a lot of places that are just public places, public roadways. And so that's also going to be under this bill as well. So,
as Adam says, a lot of that is reflected from the failed riot legislation last year, I think.
Yeah, they were just working on this stuff, weren't they?
Yeah.
Yes, they were.
Yeah, and it's interesting. They changed strategies, I guess. They went from going after rioters to going after the homeless and panhandlers to try to accomplish some of the same goals. It's really shameful. And again, I see it as an attack on freedom. And these are so-called small government folks. These are folks who say, don't tread on me. Don't tread on me unless... Right,
you're wearing a mask on the sidewalk.
And I just want to point out...
Then you get treaded, apparently.
Another little nugget about HB 24 and how HB 24 is becoming law. So HB 24 was introduced by Representative Reed Ingram, and he got it sent to his committee, County and Municipal Governments, instead of the Judiciary, because he chairs the committee for County and Municipal Governments.
How convenient.
That's a lot easier.
So it's a lot easier to get your bill on the agenda and get that favorable report and get that vote out when you control the committee.
Right.
And when the Rules Committee gets to decide behind closed doors what goes where.
Right. Even if it has nothing to do really with your committee, even if it's not the appropriate place. Wow. Well, thanks for that little nugget.
And even if, again, I've been working specifically on this bill. I have talked to every legislator on the committee. I've emailed every legislator on those committees to say, this is a bad bill. This is an unconstitutional bill.
And
no response.
Oh,
I can't imagine how any of it, or a vast majority of it, can be constitutional.
Well,
honestly, it's like
we say that, but the way things are going in this country, nothing would surprise me coming out of our court system these days. So.
And they bring up sodomy multiple times in this, just so y'all know.
Wow.
Again, with that theme, right?
Interesting. Like, I don't know how that's related, but, you know, there
it's
you go.
soliciting prostitution or sodomy, which is a very ancient term.
Right.
So-
Yeah, it's like they just wanted to shoehorn in
Okay,
that
so
one.
if they can target more people.
That's very interesting because, of course, our sodomy laws have also largely been judged unconstitutional because
Right.
they target people with same-sex attraction.
Yeah, so here it is, the don't tread on me, small government, pro-freedom Republicans attacking your rights to exist, your rights to travel.
As long as
your
you
rights
don't
to-
go outside, I think you're good with this bill. Like, you won't have any problems with this bill.
Yeah,
Just
don't go
never
outside.
never leave your
well,
house.
don't get TikTok either, right? You're not supposed to have TikTok. They're against that because it's Chinese. Really, it's the last bill I had before we get to some education stuff is SB 242, and this is the Landlord-Tenant Act. It would amend the Landlord-Tenant Act to remove the cap on security deposits, which is bad news for tenants.
And Alabama already has some of the weakest tenant protections in the country.
Absolutely, very weak protections for tenants, and here's one of like the very few is that there is a cap on security deposits, and they want to get rid of that. They want to protect their precious landlords. Their sweet little landlords that they have to protect.
Who aren't even based in Alabama. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about the private equity from Nashville, from Atlanta,
Right.
from Chicago, New York that is bringing dollars in and sweeping up private residential housing to rent it back out to us. So none of that wealth is actually benefiting the community.
Right. Right, and you've got like Blackstone, and you've got these mega corporations and big finance that is buying up housing, out-of-state investors coming in, and we're seeing that a lot in Huntsville, and you know we'll probably talk a little bit more about that when we get to Huntsville stuff, but that's bad news. Really, just interesting that that's going to be your priority to remove security deposit caps for tenants. I don't know. I guess those legislators feel they were elected to protect landlords, which is quite the shame. So I did want to transition into education legislation because there's a lot happening with education. Last week was a really busy week with education legislation and committee hearings. There was less movement this week, which frankly is probably a good thing. The Alabama legislature will reconvene on Tuesday, May 23rd for its 24th day of the regular legislative session. Next week will be a 3-day week. There are only 7 legislative days left in the 2023 regular session. So let's buckle up and see if we can survive the rest of the session without too much damage. Public schools are the cornerstone of a community and critical to a democratic society. And yet across the country, and right here in Alabama, public education is under attack. We've already mentioned efforts like the Divisive Concepts Bill, which directly targets educators and their ability to teach truthfully while also pushing offensive, ridiculous narratives about what's happening inside public school classrooms. As you heard in the Arise update, there are multiple voucher-style privatization bills advancing in the legislature. More on that in a moment. There's a renewed push for improving pay for education support professionals, or ESPs. Definitely support that. These are the support staff who help our school systems function, from the custodians and cafeteria workers to bus drivers and special education aides. Unlike certified educators like teachers, counselors, and librarians, or like school nurses, there is no state salary matrix for support staff. There's no state minimum salary. There's no guaranteed step raises or a step raise policy. There's no roadblocks to outsourcing or privatization of their jobs. We've seen how Huntsville City Schools has been a pioneer in this sort of privatization, outsourcing hundreds of support staff jobs to temp staffing agencies like Spur. Hiring and retention is a major problem, especially if and when folks can find better pay at the local McDonald's. Many support staff are doing it for the benefits, like the PHIP healthcare and the state pension, which of course outsourced employees don't have. A lot of times these folks work for the schools to have benefits and then work second and third jobs to be able to make ends meet. So the Alabama Education Association is making a push for a state minimum of $15 per hour. This was found to be highly offensive by the creeps at right-wing rag 1819 News. But I'm going to wait until Jacob is back next week before we put them on blast, because I don't want him to miss out on that. That is right up his alley.
This is one of his wedding gifts.
So, yeah, we're going to save that one for you, Jacob, next
we love
week.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hope you're having a great time.
Hope you're having a great time. Next week, you can rant and rave at the 1819 creeps.
He'll be all pin up, too. It'll be like a whole week's worth.
Yeah.
So it'll be double.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, the Education Trust Fund budget has a record amount of revenue this year, and everyone wants a piece of the pie. There's been all sorts of pork projects proposed. Governor Kay Ivey even wanted to fund a water park with education dollars. And then, as head of the retirement systems of Alabama, David Bronner put it, there's killing the future with tax cuts. Last year, the 2022 legislative session passed 18 tax cuts, costing the ETF budget $160 million per year, or $1.6 billion over the next 10 years. The 2023 legislature has introduced more than 20 additional tax cuts, none of which have revenue to replace them. The House unanimously passed HB 115 and 116, costing the Education Trust Fund $82 million per year. That's $820 million over the next 10 years. The cut to the state income tax on overtime, which is Anthony Daniels' bill that we've discussed previously, that would be about $40 million per year. Elimination of the grocery tax would result in a $600 million blow to the education budget. Now, Alabama has the second lowest tax revenue per capita, the lowest if you include the lottery. And I agree with Dr. Bronner that this makes for a financial disaster in the coming years. And now, don't get me wrong, I'm all for ending regressive taxes that disproportionately hurt working folks. Alabama's tax system is both highly inadequate to fund essential services while also highly regressive, with too much of the burden borne by the poor and the working class. We're all for removal of the grocery sales tax, and I'm not going to turn down a tax cut on overtime pay. But without replacement revenue, there are consequences. We have to reject this devil's choice, that the only way to get modest tax relief for some workers is to promise austerity for others. Relieving the tax burden on the poorest among us shouldn't mean cuts to our public schools. The Alabama legislators are presenting us with a false dichotomy. There are numerous ways they could raise more than enough revenue to pay for these tax cuts while protecting funding for education and other essential services. For one, they could tax the wealthy elites, tax the ruling class, the folks who can most afford it. Alabama legislators could close tax loopholes that benefit the richest among us. They could end the federal income tax deduction. We could look at the so-called timber land that is taxed at far lower rates than the land your home sits on and at lower rates than timberland in neighboring states. There's a lot of needed reform to our backwards tax system. But even if they couldn't muster that political will, even if they were too cowardly to dare risk offending the oligarchs, they could still generate billions in additional revenue without tax reform. Alabama legislators could legalize gambling, like casinos and sports betting. Alabama could legalize recreational marijuana, and Lord knows the first state in the South to do it will be booming. Alabama could do what folks have been asking for since before I was born, which is to establish a lottery, like all of our neighboring states.
I believe Alabama is actually the last state in the union that does not have a state lottery.
Wow.
Yeah, these are all pretty popular things, I would say, too.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
I have also been told by some of the people who work at A&M that Alabama has some of the best soil for cannabis cultivation.
Oh.
We have a great agricultural setup in our colleges and universities. We have agricultural universities. We have a lot of farmers. We have good soil. We have Gulf Shores. We've got the mountains in Mentone. I'm just saying, if Alabama were the first state to do it, it would be booming, and we would be leading the South in a lot of ways.
We would be an island in the South.
Right. But, is that what's on the table? Of course not. And you can say there's drawbacks to all those policies I just listed, and that's fine to discuss, because of course there are, right? The lottery has its issues. But let's not pretend like the legislature doesn't have plenty of options on the table. We don't have to accept the exchange between a promise of modest tax relief for some for a promise of education austerity for others. And on the subject of gutting the Education Trust Fund, there's a push for an expansion to private school scholarships under the Alabama Accountability Act. They want to lift the cap by another $20 million. That's $20 million more in private school scholarships, that much more public money into private pockets, that much more in tax write-offs for the wealthy donors. Even worse is the Price Act, sponsored by the state senator from my district, unfortunately, Republican Larry Stutz. And by the way, Google Larry Stutz lawsuit, just for some interesting reading, in case you're bored. The Price Act would be a full-scale voucher program. Check out this testimony from my former APSO sister, Allison King, who's with the Alabama Education Association. This is from the Ed Policy Committee hearing last week on the Price Act.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Our most glaring concern with the Price Act is that there is no overarching accountability or oversight of taxpayer dollars. In fact, nothing is required in this bill that the money be spent on education at all, much less quality education. Price's online parent payment portal is an ideal setup for fraud. In fact, the bill itself addresses fraud and says that only when it's substantial will it be dealt with. That's on line 436. Because the overwhelming majority of parents who are receiving these vouchers already have their children in private school, they can use this money on pretty much anything they want. It could be used for new iPads on line 531, ACT or SAT prep courses on line 536, Space Camp on line 520, or even Travel Ball on line 513. These are all allowable expenses under the law. Talk about double dipping. The law also says that parents can use the AAA money that's already in place for private school tuition and then also receive the voucher for their under the Price Act as well. No public school student right now receives double dollars. There's zero oversight and accountability for these education service providers. All that is required of them is to sign up on a website, not directly pay kickbacks, and give a receipt. That's in line 572 of the bill. That's all. There's no review of the curriculum, services, materials, or anything else. Anyone can get online and say that they're an education service provider and receive the money. I have a link to the how this has worked in the state of Arizona, which a lot of this is being based off of. I'd be happy to share with you, but their state superintendent was very clear about what a major problem this is. All of our current public schools have required accountability for funds, achievement, and more. Why would we not require that of this as well? I work for AEA, yes, but I spent 10 years as a classroom teacher and school administrator, and I know directly the impact that this would have on our schools. Our communities are built around strong public schools, and if we continue to siphon dollars out of our public school systems, we are hurting our communities all the way around and hurting our families and hurting our students. Thank you for your time.
Great job, Ms. King.
Yeah, absolutely. Shout out to Allison. Really appreciate your testimony there. Proponents of school vouchers claim that the tax money should follow the child. Now, nowhere else do we take this approach or follow this logic. My tax money for roads doesn't follow my car. When I disagree with the local police force, I don't get a home security savings account as an alternative choice. Nobody asked how I feel when my tax money funds wars all over the globe, and I wasn't given the choice to opt out of it. The push for school choice is about putting public money into private pockets while pushing reactionary segregationist ideology backed by a coalition of capitalist vultures and bigots and religious extremists of various stripes. Most of it financed by a handful of billionaires. And the results of these experiments are unsurprisingly harmful for students, educators, families, and communities. Call me radical, but what if we ensured every child an excellent, free, appropriate public education instead? Maybe, just maybe, We could try that after decades of sabotage through corporate reform and privatization. The profiteers offer choice in the marketplace as a replacement for rights in the community. They don't want an education system with guaranteed rights. They want an education marketplace with consumer options, which, like all consumer options, depends on the numbers in your bank account and the amount of green paper in your wallet. And when they say school choice, they really mean the school can choose its students. Educating children is not the same as producing widgets. And given how inequitable and dysfunctional privatized healthcare is, just as an example, why would we believe this will work better for the many and not just a few? It won't, of course, but that's the thing. These folks don't actually believe in a society, or a public, or a community. Only individuals and their money. Educators, parents, students, and communities must unite to defend the teaching profession, the resources our schools rely on, and ultimately the very concept of public education. And with that, folks, we're going to take our last break. When we get back, we're going to talk some local stories, including one local city paying millions of dollars for chain stores, and some discussion of Huntsville and their ranking as a city. So stay tuned. We'll be right back.
There's a lot of talk about a shortage of workers, but that's not the case with IBW 558. We have provided our customers over 3,000 workers and performed over 3 million man-hours in a pandemic year. With 8,000 OJT hours, 900 classroom hours, OSHA 30, and a state license, our members receive the equivalent of a master's degree. That's what makes IBW 558 the right choice for your electrical needs. Look us up at Facebook or at IBW558.org.
Support for this program is provided by the International Association for Machinists and Aerospace Workers, Local Lodge 44 in Decatur, Alabama. Learn more at iamaw44.org.
Support for this program also comes from the Iron Workers, Local 477. So if you are looking for contractors with lower than average EMR and TRIR, they tell me that if you need to know what those mean, then you will. Or if you need to supplement a workforce at any level for any amount of time, short or long term, if you need iron workers that come trained and certified at no extra cost, or if you need workers from superintendent down to general laborer, and you're looking to start work on a project, or you're unhappy with your current contractor situation, you need to call my friend Jeb Miles with the Iron Workers Local 477. They only work with the best in the business, vetted contractors, and can do all kinds of jobs, from roofing to steel and bridge erection, from welding to heavy rigging, from structural repairs to machinery alignment, and much more. They supply manpower on 4 of the 5 largest projects in North Alabama, so you know they're legit. If you need good quality, safe, efficient, diligent, and knowledgeable workers on your job, then you need the Iron Workers Local 477. Call Jeb Miles at 256-383-3334 or via email at local477@bellsouth.net, and make sure you tell them that you heard about them on the Valley Labor Report.
We're the nurses, firefighters, and claims representatives that help keep our government services running. We respond to natural disasters. We care for our nation's veterans, and we investigate discrimination in the workplace. We are federal and D.C. government workers, and we are proud to serve the American people. Working in more than 70 agencies across the government, we know we can fulfill our mission because our union has our back. Learn more at AFGE.org. Paid for by the American Federation of Government Employees, AFL-CIO.
The Laborers International Union of North America, Local 366, is proudly recruiting North Alabama workers to work construction and nuclear plant maintenance. If you're interested, please contact Donna at their training center to start the process. That phone number is 256-415-7452. Again, that phone number is 256-415-7452. No experience is needed. Free training is offered, but you must be able to pass a background check and a drug test. Local hiring that grows our community with good-paying jobs that have benefits is their mission. Live better, work union, Local 366, feel the power.
Support for this program also comes from the Mid-South Council of Retail, Wholesale, and Department Store Union. Learn more at rwdsu.info.
I'm Attorney Tommy Sinyard. When you've been injured and need help, you need a lawyer who's with you.
Sinyard Law. You need attorneys always available to take care of you. Sinyard Law.
And keep you in the loop. It's your case. You need to know what's happening.
Sinyard Law. And never a charge to meet with us to evaluate your case. Sinyard Law.
A new firm, but an old name. One that will stay with you every step of the way.
Sinyard Law. The name with proven results.
Do you work in an auto manufacturing plant? Are you tired of taking pride in your work without getting the respect you deserve? Consider joining the fight to unionize. Auto workers across the industry are coming together because with a union, we can negotiate for the pay, benefits, and security that we deserve and can help sustain our families. In union plants, workers bargain for long-term wage increases, competitive bonuses, and more affordable benefits. You can join the growing wave of organizing today. Find out more and contact us at Uniting Auto Workers on Facebook or contact UAW Region 8 in Lebanon, Tennessee by going to www.uawregion8.net. That's www.uawregion8.net. A better future is ours.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell. How the good old union has come in here to dwell.
All right, folks, you are still listening to the Valley Labor Report, Alabama's only union talk radio show. My name is Adam Keller. I'm here with Ben and Tahira. Special episode today. Shout out Jacob. Hope you're enjoying yourself. Really appreciate everyone tuning in this morning. Appreciate the comments, as always, in the YouTube channel. Really appreciate y'all who are participating, who are contributing, who are just tuning in, maybe even for the first time. Really appreciate that. I want to have a couple of plugs here before we riff on some local stories. I did want to mention that Labor Notes is, of course, hosting a series of online trainings. And they have a great stewards workshop coming up next week on Just Cause with the great labor lawyer Bob Schwartz. So check that out at labornotes.org. And then there's an event that I just was turned on to a couple of days ago happening in Birmingham at the Birmingham Civil Rights Institute. There's a community town hall on organizing for worker and healthcare justice in Central Alabama. National Nurses United is involved. AFL-CIO is involved. There was we did share it on our Facebook page if you want to go check that out at the Valley Labor Report. It's Tuesday, May 23rd, 5 to 7 p.m. So nurses, folks who work in the healthcare industry, those of you in Central Alabama, check out that community town hall. It seems like it'll be a great event. We definitely love our nurses, and we love National Nurses United. And don't forget our new weekly series called Shop Talk, which airs online Thursday mornings. Again, Shop Talk is dedicated to labor education, history, and training. You can check it out Thursdays at 9:30 a.m. Central, or you can check out the podcast a few days later. If you're not on our email list at tvlr.fm, definitely sign up for that to stay up to date on the Valley Labor Report and all of the work that we're doing to highlight the labor movement in the Tennessee Valley and across the South. And again, you can leave us voicemails throughout the week at 844-899-TVLR. You can buy our merch, like our cool new shirts, at tvlr.fm. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share to the Valley Labor Report. So, in just a couple of minutes remaining here on FM radio, just a reminder that at 11 o'clock we'll be online only on YouTube and Facebook. We've got an interview coming up with AFGE's public policy director to talk about the debt limit crisis and what's going on there, so that should be a good one. With a couple local stories to talk about, I wanted to mention my town, the city of Athens. It's become my town. I've lived there for a few years now. It's not where I'm from originally, but, that's where I live, city of Athens. And they did something really interesting in their city council meeting a while back. I found it buried in an article. The article from the Athens News Courier was about local church opposing a cigar lounge downtown. God forbid someone have fun somewhere. There will always be a church there to smash that out. That's local politics for you in the South, for sure. But during the regular meeting, the city council voted 4-1 in favor of an incentive package for Noon Athens P3 LLC for the proposed development of TJ Maxx, Ross, Ulta Beauty, Rack Room Shoes, and Five Below. The resolution stated that the development is estimated to bring more than 125 new jobs and generate approximately $20 million in annual taxable sales. Now listen to this. The city will pay the company, quote, in order to facilitate the development, $1.9 million when the 5 stores open, an additional $1.9 million when the stores are open for 1 year, and a final payment of $1.9 million at 2 years. The total amount the city will pay out is $5.7 million. The city of Athens is paying $5.7 million for a few chain stores. And, I couldn't help but have a few questions. How long until the tax revenue makes up for this payment? How many of these supposed 125 jobs actually pay a living wage? Do locally owned small businesses get such treatment? Why aren't there incentives like this for worker co-ops and more, community wealth building? Are there any strings attached for these incentives? Got a lot of questions about it.
So I actually did a little math for you, Adam.
And I appreciate that. I'm not a math person.
So City of Athens has a 3% sales tax rate. That is City of Athens, not Limestone County, not the state of Alabama, that each levy their own sales and use tax. So just looking at City of Athens revenue, they're going to be pulling about $600,000 a year in sales tax from these businesses, supposedly. That
supposedly,
means,
right? And this is based on their
best case scenario.
Right, that's their estimated revenue projection.
That is best case scenario. So that takes 9 years of revenue to match what they're giving in incentives over these first 3 years.
Wow. So that's
that's just to break even.
That's just to break even. That is just to break even. That is really interesting to me. And, I think you also had mentioned that store managers at Ulta.
Yeah, so I also started looking into some of the average salaries for these chain stores. Not one of them pays more than $15 an hour at the top end.
Right. Wow.
Which means hourly associates that are part-time, that are probably not even qualifying for benefits, because that's how all of these chain stores and big box stores operate. They operate in skeleton crews. They extract as much as they can out of their workers. They stretch them as thin as possible. They give them they give them schedules where they can't have a second or third job, right? Because you've got to be totally available for your 15 hours a week that you get assigned.
Yeah.
And how are we supposed to support our families off of that?
Right. And that's the thing. It's one thing to say we're going to do economic development. We're going to create a ton of good paying jobs. That's not what this is, right? And so don't brag to me about the jobs you're creating at these chain stores. And it just really irritates me that this is what local government is doing with tax dollars. And I'm all for having more shopping options in Athens. I want to be clear about that. I get tired of driving to Madison and Huntsville. All of my neighbors do too. But legally bribing developers seems weird, given Limestone is the fastest growing county in the state. And no doubt these places will be profitable without your little bribe / development.
That's what I was thinking. Are these companies looking at states that are going to pay them out, or are they looking at where places are growing and they're going to move there either way, you know.
Right, absolutely.
It's like maybe they are because they know that you can push on Alabama and somehow money's going to come out for your random development. But it's not a good precedent to set.
Right.
If you're like, yeah, we need a new Walmart, we'll just get the tax dollar wallet out and see what we can do with them or something. It's
And
like,
just
come
think
on.
about what a small business could do with $5.7 million.
Right.
Right? How many years of rent alone would that cover? How many
Right.
salaries alone would that
Right.
cover?
Right.
Decent, good salaries.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So we're going to be talking more local stories in overtime. That's where we're heading into overtime. We're going to talk to AFGE. We've got some big labor stories from across the country, an eclectic mix. So stay tuned online to the live stream on YouTube or Facebook. All power to the workers.
See y'all radio folks later.
All right, y'all. Hopefully we are off the radio by now. If not, you're still listening to me, and that's okay. Buckle up for what comes next. So, appreciate everyone who's staying tuned online on YouTube and Facebook. We got a lot of comments. We've got Infinite Content and Jeb and Army Mobility Officer. We got quite a few folks. Solo Monk is in the chat. Yeah, absolutely. Y'all check out the art and music of Solo Monk. He, of course, did the great graphic background that you're seeing on our YouTube screen. He did our standby music that you heard at the very beginning. I really love some Solo Monk work. So thanks again for joining us. Yeah, we were just wrapping up the main show talking about these incentives that Athens is giving. To kind of put a bow on that, I really do think that economic development is one of those things that has been skewed in such a way. There's other ways to do that, and if you're going to be writing checks for $5-6 million to developers, why not write checks like that to employee co-ops, worker-owned co-ops?
Why not put community benefits in those agreements?
Right, community benefits agreements. Jobs to Move America and other organizations have been working hard on those kind of things. Why not put some strings attached? Why not say you have to have X number of living wage jobs that you provide? Why not penalize the employers if their employees have to rely on public assistance because they're not paid enough or not provided benefits? What about the environmental impacts of these developments and these stores? What about the union busting activities that may occur there and their labor law violations or compliance? There's a lot of ways to look at economic development in a way that really centers the community first and centers everyday working people first, as opposed to centering developers. So I haven't done a lot of digging yet on this particular developer. I did some quick Google searching to figure out what I could see. Not a lot there, which is interesting. So, I don't know all the backstory there. I assume there is a backstory because there typically is one. So I just wanted to put that out there. That's an example of what local government's doing, and certainly in my town, and I really don't appreciate it. Gotta say, don't appreciate it. But we also wanted to talk a little bit while we're waiting for Jackie Simon of AFGE to come in. I wanted to talk a little bit about Huntsville. So, as I mentioned, I do live in Athens. I've lived in Athens for a few years now, but I spent my adolescence in Huntsville. I lived in Huntsville throughout my middle school and high school years and early 20s. So, I lived there for about a decade, if not longer. A lot of good memories in Huntsville, a lot of good friends, a lot of good people in Huntsville. There's a lot to love about Huntsville. That said, the city of Huntsville PR machine has been in overdrive lately. You may have seen some news that Huntsville did get demoted to apparently the second best place to live. It had been named the best place to live at one point, which I just really find baffling. I find it baffling because you're talking about a city with a sketchy local government, right? And that's not just my opinion. They literally won the Golden Padlock Award for their lack of transparency. Okay, that's the kind of local government we're talking about.
Not just once, but twice.
Twice. Twice. So you've got a sketchy local government. You've got a dysfunctional school system. And that's probably putting it mildly. All right? Then you've got a violent police force with a history of discrimination and murder and abuse. All right? And that's our government, that's our school system, that's our police force in Huntsville.
It's business as usual.
Right. And that's before we even get into the lack of public transportation, the lack of really any public services by virtue of being in Alabama, where, oh, by the way, let us not forget, we do rank at or near the bottom of everything, right? So you can't put Huntsville in a little bubble and separate it from the broader reactionary state government and the lack of investment in our state. So the idea that a place with a sketchy local government, a violent police force, a dysfunctional school system, a lack of public transportation and other services, surrounded by a reactionary state government, is the best place to live in the United States of America, that's quite the stretch for me.
But you know what I think we need, Adam? I think we need billions in investment for Space Command to come here.
Yeah, if only that would happen, right?
I think billions in federal dollars would definitely fix it.
Definitely. Oh, yes. Only more federal dollars. If only we could get more federal dollars.
Those small government dollars.
Yeah. I mean, and that's the thing. Like, when they talk about Huntsville being the best place to live, okay, like for who? For who? Is it for working class people who are being priced out of 5 Points and priced out of their other neighborhoods? Is it the best place to live for those folks? Or is it the best place to live for folks making six figures on the arsenal, working on the war machine? And no disrespect. Okay, I know there's AFGE members out there. No disrespect to you. But there is a very stark divide in Huntsville between the haves and the have-nots. And again, this isn't, an isolated place. We're not on an island. We are in Alabama, where we are subject to laws from Montgomery. That impacts the quality of life here. So, again, I find it hard to believe that there's only one city in the entire nation that is a better place to live than the city of Huntsville, Alabama. A place that put a man on the moon but can't keep a teacher in a classroom. A place where the city's leadership rallies behind a convicted murderer. So, as you mentioned, Space Command. Let's talk about Space Command, because do we have before we get on Space Command, let me just check. Do we have our guest yet, or?
Let me double check.
Sure.
I'm not seeing them in the Zoom right now.
Okay,
So.
Yeah, because I don't want to get off on a rant about Space Command as we await our public policy director from AFGE. But so there has been some big news coming down the pike about Space Command, which was slated to come to Huntsville, was slated to come to Huntsville. For those of you listening outside of the Tennessee Valley, let me just say this, and before Tahira gives us some updates on this, Huntsville, Alabama is the Pentagon South. Huntsville is heavily dependent on federal dollars between NASA and the Army and the broader military-industrial complex, which fuels the city's economy and the entire region's economy, frankly. So that's kind of the context in which this is happening, this Space Command decision. So it's not as if this would be like, a brand new source. I mean, it would be a new source of federal investment, but it's not as if it's unprecedented, right? We've had NASA for some time, and we've had the Army for some time, and we've had Boeing and Raytheon and these various, contractors that work in the defense industry. And so that's, a huge part of Huntsville's economy. And we've seen recent announcements about the FBI moving significant staff.
Building a huge interdisciplinary training facility also, along with our police department and along with ALEA.
And boy, doesn't that just make me feel great as a left-wing activist here in Alabama to know that the FBI is sending thousands of people to my community.
Meanwhile, none of the local law enforcement sends any data about hate crimes or their arrest statistics to the FBI.
And see, you would think maybe maybe the FBI could say, if we're going to build a big headquarters in your community, you should probably email us all that data. You should probably send us that stuff that you're supposed to send us.
Because we're a smart city.
Right, smart city.
It's probably a lot cheaper since they're always investigating the prisons like once a year at
Right,
least.
yeah.
That
They figure-
it's easier if they just build a headquarters here.
Might as well, right? Yeah, might as well.
Yeah.
It's weird, and something that I wanted to mention is that in the 60s, Huntsville desegregated a lot more peacefully and a lot more smoothly than the rest of Alabama, and that was in large part because of federal intervention. Basically, the feds were able to use NASA and the defense industry as leverage against the bigots, and the local ruling elites realized that if they wanted to keep the economy going, if they wanted the federal dollars to keep flowing into this community, and it floating on those federal investments, if they wanted that to happen, they couldn't cling to segregation any longer, right? And so the federal government did exert some leverage there. And that's not to paint the federal government a rosy light that somehow in the 60s they were always on the right, when it comes to civil rights by any means. But that was an example, and we've seen this time after time where the federal government has to step in and kind of force Alabama politicians to do the right thing. And so I can't help but think of that when we're talking about this Space Command decision, because we've gotten some news about that, right?
Yeah, so let's talk about what that reason actually is that they are now reconsidering. And that reason is HB 454, which has been introduced into the Alabama legislature. Now, abortions are already illegal in Alabama. You already cannot obtain an abortion unless you are literally dying. Unless you are literally dying. And there is only one hospital in the state that still performs DNCs.
Wow.
So if you are in medical distress, getting help is already very difficult.
Right.
This bill, HB 454, makes abortion murder. It means anybody who seeks or obtains or performs an abortion can be charged with murder.
Wow.
Sentenced to the death penalty.
Right.
And you know what that's going to do? That's going to take this state where healthcare providers already don't get the reimbursements they need to support their practices, already struggle to provide services, already have their hospitals stretched to the max. They're leaving the state.
Right.
They are leaving the state because they can't stay here and practice safely.
Yeah, I mean, they can't even live up to their oath, right? To help and to do no harm. How can you do that under such restrictive conditions? The idea that we would charge someone with murder.
And frankly, who wants to move here?
Right.
If you are a person who can get pregnant and you are an age where you could get pregnant, why would you move here? Why would you subject yourself to it? Why would you even think about trying to have children on purpose here if you can't get the care you need?
And I think that's a good point, because with Space Command, basically the news was like there was some leaks to come out that the Biden administration is reconsidering whether or not Space Command will be relocated here to Alabama. Or if it will stay in Colorado Springs, where it's kind of already been. And so that's come out. There's been a lot of chatter about it in Alabama politics. All the legislators and congressmen, and, they're all, talking about it. Basically, all the worst people you can imagine are real pissed off about it right now. And, some of the reporting indicated that it was in direct response to Alabama's abortion laws that are so outrageously extreme.
Draconian.
Cruel. And the thing that the federal government has to consider is, can they, in good faith, require people to relocate here? Can they ask their employees to take a step down in their quality of life, to take a step back in their freedom and their constitutional rights by moving here? Right? Because fundamentally, definitionally, you're going to have less rights when you get here. If you're coming from Colorado and you come to Alabama, you are less free. you are less free. And you're going to suffer from the conditions of this state. And the backwards laws that we have, the quality of life issues that we have. So who wants to sign up for that? If you're in Space Command, would you really be excited to come to Alabama, where your wives and daughters will lose rights, where your community will be bare bones investment, your community will, maybe you'll have a decent public school, but maybe you won't. It's an interesting situation, and what I'm interested in, is there any will in the Biden administration and the current Justice Department to actually use this leverage to extract any hint of progress from the city of Huntsville and from the state of Alabama?
Because that's the other thing, right? You would expect at least some of our leaders would look at this and say, boy, this is a problem we need to do something about.
Right.
At the very least, Huntsville leadership could take a look at this and say, we are most directly affected by this decision. We don't support this legislation.
Right.
They could take a stand. They could have an opinion.
Right, they could. And you also see Tommy Tuberville as being kind of singled out because of some of his antics and holding up appointments in Congress and just his rhetoric and antics overall. The city of Huntsville could come right out and say, Tommy Battle could come right out and say, hey, I don't agree with him. Hey, he doesn't represent us. We're more than that. He could say that if he believed it. I mean, hell, he could say it even if he didn't believe it. Wouldn't be the first time. So, yeah, it's interesting to see what the responses are going to be from the bigwigs in Huntsville and from the bigwigs in the state. They're real mad about it. But will they learn anything from it? Will they learn the consequences? That sometimes playing stupid games gets you stupid prizes? Will they learn that?
Will they prioritize safety for pregnant people?
Right.
I mean, the other thing I want to talk about here is that fewer than 1/3 of Alabama counties have a hospital with a labor and delivery ward.
And that's where you want to move all these people to? You want to relocate an entire workforce to a place
where there's no safe place to give birth.
Right.
Oh, we do have a caller. Infinite Content is on the line.
Okay,
if
cool.
y'all want to talk to it.
Sure, yeah, bring him on.
Let me get you on one sec.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if we would even be able to. So welcome, Infinite Content.
How have y'all been?
Good, good. Thanks for calling in this morning.
Okay, so I've been listening to you all. I'm like, geez, I think the only state that might be worse than Alabama right now is Florida. Because
it
you all
seems that way.
Anti-immigrant legislation in because you all understand that agriculture is important to your economy.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
I wanted to riff out. I'm gonna probably riff on a few things, but DeSantis with his idiotic anti-immigrant legislation, he's going to wreck the entire state economy. Not all of it, because agriculture, tourism, hospitality, construction. Those are the four big things that generate Florida's economy. Now you don't have a labor force.
Right.
Who's going to? Because it's been proven that Americans will not work in certain agricultural jobs because they are too damn hard.
The pay's too low. The conditions are too terrible. And yeah, they don't want to treat people fairly, so they take advantage of the exploitation that they can do here with vulnerable folks who are, immigrants, people who are desperate, people who, worked in agriculture previously and so are maybe, more keen to do that kind of work. Yeah, you're exactly right. It's gonna have an economic impact, and that's where sometimes you see the conflicts within these people on the right wing is like they're pro-profit, pro-business, pro-growth, but their backwards ideologies sometimes bump into that.
Because they're profiting
it's like,
off
okay,
of it,
you want
right?
Yeah, they want to shoot the gun, but they're forgetting about the kickback.
Right.
And I'm like, you're going to, and that's going to have a domino effect on the national economy because now citrus fruit's not going to be available. Certain citrus fruit, because we can still get stuff from California, but it takes
prices will go up too.
Transport things from California to the East Coast. It does from Florida to the up north.
Right.
And what's always crazy to me is that these policies have already been proven out, right? Alabama has already implemented extreme anti-immigrant legislation before in 2009 with the Stop and ID law. And what we saw was, migrants flooded out of the state, and then produce died in the fields because Alabama farmers could not hire local Alabamians to do that work.
Right, right.
I mean, what is that plan to try and put all the prison population to basically a new form of slavery and have them working?
That's a great question.
I don't think that's going to work.
Because the closest prison to us, Limestone Prison, is actually a farm prison.
Yeah. It's an interesting connection you made there. Yeah, it's an interesting connection to make.
And like the whole thing in Huntsville, I'm like, look, people will rather quit their jobs as opposed to moving to a regressive region of the country. Because if I'm working in Philly, you say, "Oh, you're being transferred down to Mississippi." Nope. I'm being transferred. Nah. And that's not to disparage the good people living in Alabama. Sorry, I got fire.
No, that's okay. You're in the city.
Well, also your tax dollars that you pay from your wages and your jobs go straight into that state system and stuff too. So you gotta have to reckon with like all the stuff the state is using your tax dollars for, building TJ Maxxes and beating down on minorities.
I'm just looking at what's happening in that state west. You know that you all always get compared to. Well, they always, Mississippi. Like they're wasting their. Like the Brett Favre scandal, still $75 million of $75 million of welfare funds misappropriated. I'm sorry. Like I said, I said I was going to riff on a couple of things.
You're good.
Cut me off whenever.
I totally agree. And I think I don't take it as a disparaging thing to say, hey, if I'm in Philly, I don't think I would move to Mississippi or Alabama. I don't take it that way at all. Because it's just an honest reflection of the situation. And I know some people don't feel that way. Some people are attracted by the low cost of living. But, sometimes you get what you pay for.
And how long is that low cost of living going to last?
Right. How long is the low cost of living going to last? Because we already see gentrification and these other things happening right here in the state.
Yeah, BlackRock coming and buying up whole neighborhoods and price gouging everybody. I'm like, if you're already getting paid below national average wages, and somebody comes in and raises the rent on you, what do they want you all to do? Just want people to live in the woods? Then you're gonna get caught by those public trespassing laws.
Right.
But I do have a bit of good news to speak on when it comes to labor. The Oakland teachers won their strike.
Nice.
Very cool.
I haven't really followed that, so that's great to hear.
Yeah, so they got the concessions. The support staff, they're getting more support staff. They're getting raises. I think they're getting better conditions. But shout out to the Oakland school teachers.
What better way to invest in our future than actually educating our workers?
Yeah.
Paying them a fair wage.
No. We need to have the work. That's the thing. They want the workers just smart enough to use the tool, but not smart enough to think beyond that.
Right. Yeah.
Just smart enough to pay them their tax dollars and
just
don't do anything else. Though.
No need for critical thinking.
Oh, and by the way, Iowa, what is Iowa's thing where they're trying to take us back to the times of the jungle?
Yeah, Iowa loosening these child labor laws. And I've heard that the Department of Labor has even said that it could be unconstitutional or it could be illegal what they're trying to do.
Because aren't they trying to, they're trying to get 14-year-olds into meatpacking plants.
Yes, like very dangerous conditions.
Go back to the times of the jungle.
Mm-hmm. You're exactly right.
I'm like, what next? We're going to just have kids going in coal mines again?
Yeah, well, that seems to be the situation we're moving in, where we're regressing to the Gilded Age in the times of the jungle. We're regressing in terms of the inequality in our country, the concentration of wealth and monopolies. And now, we're having to fight over child labor, which is a battle we thought we won 100 years ago.
May I suggest that we go back to defenestration? And for those who don't know, defenestration means throwing somebody out of a window. And I think we should start off throwing people out of third story windows, and so they get the lesson learned. We just move up higher floors. They'll get the point.
Until we get to the top of the 5/1.
Well, no, I mean, eventually at a certain level, it doesn't matter once you go out the window. It's not like I said, but can't just do one person. You got to do a bunch of people, and those who survive need to understand we're throwing you out of higher windows. So.
Well, and of course, this is all metaphorical windows for anyone listening.
Not literal windows.
Not literal windows.
We are not
this is all like in Minecraft, is what we're talking about.
Allegedly.
But no, I understand what you're saying. There is just there is a viciousness to the ruling class in this country, where it does seem like they're just pushing and pushing and pushing people to the brink of survival. And there just seems to be attacks coming from so many multiple directions. But that's why I'm glad you shared some good news with us today about the Oakland teachers strike, because I think that is a good reminder that for all these difficulties that we're facing, when we as working people come together and we join each other and we have each other's backs, that we can fight back against this stuff and we can make progress.
We just have to organize.
Absolutely.
You have to organize.
Oh, by the way, in a stand of solidarity with the Writers Guild and SAG, don't watch any of these reality shows or game shows that they're going to be putting on during prime time in the fall. Get them in their pockets by the ratings, and not watching prime time television.
Plus, there will be no writers, so it'll probably be some bad episodes, anyways.
Right? Yeah.
Well, like I said, they go to reality shows and game shows when they don't have.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, to kind of like cover up the all the missing actual content.
That's what they did last go around, and it actually helped.
Watch some shows on the internet, like The Serfs or Leftist Mafia. By the way, I'd ask the people in Leftist Mafia if they can invite Valley Labor Report on.
Okay, cool.
Also, trying to get you all on. Maybe see if you can talk with Ben Dixon and a couple other shows, because I think that you all's message needs to be spread, and I'm always going to try and make the smaller platforms get bigger.
Awesome.
That's what it's all
about.
Yeah,
I really
for
appreciate
sure.
that.
Thank you for your support.
Yeah, very much appreciate it. And
yeah,
we've got some great guests coming.
I'm gonna jump off now, and you all can. I'll let you all rant, and but let that one topic that you didn't talk about sit for another week or so, and let Jacob cook. Let him cook on it.
Definitely will. Definitely will.
All right. Solidarity.
Thanks,
appreciate
brother.
the call, my
appreciate
friend.
you.
Thank you.
As always, appreciate Infinite Content, our big fan up in Philly. And we have some great guests coming up this summer. I just got to say, like, as a preview, I've got enough guests to book out the next few months. I've got like 25 people to get back with who all want to be on the show.
And
they are some great people, some scholars, some organizers, some leaders, some folks that I think you guys will really enjoy. So we've got some good stuff planned this summer. Really appreciate the support. If there's ever, other shows or platforms you think we should be on or that we should have on our show, always let us know that. We do appreciate that very much. And we will be talking about the writer's strike here in just a moment. Ben, did we ever get our AFGE guest?
I do not see them in the Zoom still.
Huh. Okay. Well, yeah. I mean, if we've got the meeting going and they're not there, they're not there. It could be a time zone issue. I wondered that as well. So we'll see maybe if they pop up at like 12 p.m., instead of 11 a.m. We'll see. Either way, not too worried about it. We've got a lot we've been talking about today. We've been talking some local stories with Athens and them paying a developer to bring TJ Maxx to town. We've talked Space Command. We've talked Huntsville's, as a ranking for quality of life. So yeah, let's talk a little bit about the writer's strike. It's the third week of the writer's strike, with more than 11,000 Writers Guild of America members participating and shutting down productions across the country. The studios, which have seen skyrocketing corporate profits and executive pay, are so far refusing to budge and settle a fair contract for these workers. Issues include residual payments, work schedules, and staffing requirements alongside the use of artificial intelligence, or AI, which of course threatens the jobs of writers and many other workers. Writers in Broadway who were picketing to shut down a TV production were aided by members of my union, IATSE. Shout out to the International Alliance of Theatrical Stage Employees, who refused to cross their picket line. We've seen similar solidarity among Teamsters and other unions. Shout out to the band Weezer, who performed on the picket lines. I'm excited to be working their show as they come to the Orion in Huntsville pretty soon. So those of you who are in the area, definitely come see Weezer perform at the Orion Amphitheater, because they're pro-union. They're out there supporting our brothers and sisters on the picket line. We love to see that. What we don't love to see is Ken Jennings, host of Jeopardy, crossing the picket line. Very disappointed by that. I kind of liked him as a Jeopardy host. He was kind of good at the game show thing, but not a big fan of crossing picket lines. You're kind of done with me at that point. So, Ken Jennings, eat rocks. I did want to mention Boots Riley had a great tweet about the writer's strike. He said he talked to some other WGA members who were thankful for the solidarity shown by IATSE and Teamsters during the strike. Whole production shut down with 2 picketers because Teamsters and IATSE won't cross. Writers I've spoken to are definitely going to return the favor. The whole experience has been radicalizing for many WGA members, just like the IATSE strike authorization vote and ensuing calamity was radicalizing for many IATSE members. So
we're also coming up. They're going to need to negotiate contracts with DGA and SAG-AFTRA soon.
Right, yeah. Contracts for the actors and the directors expire in June. And that's going to be big. I mean, to think that the writers could be on strike at the same time as potentially the directors and the actors. Haven't heard much about the directors. That we have heard about the actors, however. So on the subject of cross-union solidarity, actors, of course, have been showing up to the picket lines. That's been heartwarming to see. A lot of, actors have been coming out to support the writers. And SAG-AFTRA, which is one of the 2 big unions for actors, announced this week that after their national board authorized a strike authorization vote, a general membership will hold a strike authorization vote. So President Fran Drescher has been encouraging members to vote yes, so that they can build the necessary leverage as they proceed with these negotiations, because, again, the contract expires at the end of the month. Now, some of her earlier comments indicated that she didn't think a strike was likely of the actors, and that maybe some of their issues were not quite the same as the writers. But there's still a lot of parallels, and they're still dealing with the same studio executives. And I think, it'll be interesting to see how the strike authorization vote turns out. But certainly if there's a resounding yes vote, I think that could only lift the spirits of the writers and, bode well for negotiations for the actors, and hopefully put more pressure on the studios.
And let's be clear about what the writers are asking for, right? Because I think a lot of people look at and hear, we want digital residuals, we want streaming residuals, and they think Netflix shows make millions of dollars just by virtue of existing. But writers actually almost never benefit from any of those streams, from any of those residuals. So you can make a TV show, have it air 5 years ago, and then for whatever reason it blows up on Netflix, it just got added, and your check is still, 3 cents that month, right? How does that make sense?
Right.
How does that turn into a career for people who are doing this? We're depending on their creativity. I mean, look at what happened during the pandemic. I think we really saw the value of creative and artistic expression in the economy.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
How can we expect these people to deliver that quality of content and not get paid a fair wage?
Right. I mean, and it's a deprofessionalization of their career, like we're seeing with so many other folks and other careers. What used to be 5 to 6 month jobs are now 5 to 6 week jobs.
And that's a huge problem, is these so-called mini rooms where you have maybe 2 or 3 people who get stuck together in a room 6 weeks before the production is supposed to start, and they're each responsible for a minimum of 2 to 3 episodes in a season.
Right. So
it's not sustainable. And then you're getting paid the weekly rate for those 5 to 6 weeks when it should have been closer to 12 or even 24.
Yeah. So they're seeing like direct impacts that way, and on the subject of the residuals and the streaming and all that, something that to me is just so egregious. Like even if you're not particularly interested in this from a labor perspective, maybe you're just thinking about it like, hey, I'm a customer of streaming. Doesn't it suck that these platforms are literally taking programs off their streaming platform just so they don't have to pay the writers and other employees residuals? Because that's what's happening, right? It's not as if it's a shelf on a store, like physical locations of stores, they have shelf space, right? We can acknowledge that they can't provide the stock of everything at all times. But Netflix, HBO, it doesn't like cost them anything really to have this material up on their website or on their platform. It's not, an opportunity cost in terms of, well, if we show this show, we can't have that show, right? They can have theoretically as many shows as they can get. It's just whether or not they want to pay for it. And so they would rather you, the customer, not even be able to watch something that was made maybe just a few years ago.
And so that's a huge problem too, right, for creatives. How does it feel to put your heart and soul into telling a story, right? All of that production goes off to a production company. The production company sells it off to a streaming service, and the streaming service says we don't want to pay the residuals anymore. So this is just in the can.
Right.
And it will never see the light of day again.
Right.
That thing that you invested all of that energy into, all of those literal dollars into production of, is just gone.
As if it never happened.
As if it never happened.
Yeah.
Can't put it on your portfolio, can't include it in your resume, can't show it to anybody. You've lost those credits.
Right. I think that speaks to the ways in which profit seeking can undermine, creativity and the arts. And so definitely sending love and solidarity with the writers, wishing them much success in this fight. I'm proud to see IATSE members standing in solidarity with the writers. Certainly looking forward to seeing what happens with the actors, and hope they can get the fair contract they deserve as well. So I did want to move on to, I have a story from the Department of Labor. We mentioned a couple of Department of Labor updates earlier in the show, but this one, I came across it and it just really stood out to me. So the U.S. Department of Labor announced a report finding nearly half of accommodations for disabled workers have no cost. The U.S. Department of Labor announced that a new report finds that nearly half of workplace accommodations made for people with disabilities can be implemented at no cost to employers. And of those that do incur a one-time cost, the median expenditure has decreased when compared to previous reports to only $300. The newly published report, Accommodation and Compliance, Low Cost, High Impact by the Job Accommodation Network, which is a service of the Department's Office of Disability Employment Policy, analyzes survey data collected from employers from 2019 to 2022. The survey collected cost information from employers using online questionnaires, which increased the number and diversity of responses significantly. Before 2019, they collected this information via one-on-one phone calls. So they got a lot more information in this particular report. In addition to gathering information about the cost of accommodations, the survey explored employers' motivations for making them, their effectiveness, and the benefits they produced. And the report includes the following findings. More than half of employers made accommodations to retain valued employees. 68.4% of employers said the accommodations made were either very effective or extremely effective after consulting JAN. Another 18.3% of employers said accommodations were somewhat effective. That's pretty good, right? 68.4% saying very or extremely effective. The indirect and direct benefits of making accommodations included retaining valuable employees, improving productivity and morale, reducing workers' compensation and training costs, and increasing workforce diversity. The report reinforces what Job Accommodation Network has repeatedly in its work observed, which is that accommodations for disabled workers are indeed a low-cost, high-impact strategy for supporting and retaining valued talent, explained Assistant Secretary for Disability Employment Policy Taryn Williams. The report also reinforces the importance of JAN's role in helping employers understand available options and implement viable solutions that work for both the employee and organization as a whole. An accommodation is a modification to the work environment or the way a job is customarily done to enable a qualified individual with a disability to enjoy equal employment opportunities. Under the ADA, covered employers must provide reasonable accommodations for applicants and employees with disabilities when requested, unless doing so would cause an undue hardship. So I wanted to lift up that report and just kind of share that with folks, that accommodations, they're effective, they help, and they're not costly.
We don't have to freeze disabled people out of the workforce.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And sometimes that's all that is required, is just some accommodation.
And that also just shows, how many jobs come with requirements or come with stipulations that actually have very little to do with getting the job done. Right?
That's a
How
good
many retail positions have you seen that are customer facing, that are primarily about like operating a cash register, that also say you must be able to lift at least 50 pounds?
Right.
Right? And that's actually because they want you to do double duty. It's because they want to run skeleton crews. It's because they want to extract from you as much as possible.
Right, right.
It's not actually because you need to do those things in order to fulfill this job.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I mean, and that's something that I think if you're in the job hunting mode and you look at these job postings, you'll see some really interesting things in there that are being required sometimes that has nothing to do with the job itself, like you said. And I think sometimes that is meant to exclude people.
Well, just look at the people beating the drum that we must return to work, even as we have discovered that remote work and working from home is often just as, if not in fact, more productive than working in an office environment.
Right.
Right? So why do employers care about having their employees in the office if they can do the same job from home? They want employees in the office so they can monitor them, so they can surveil them.
Right.
So they can
control,
so they can make every efficiency possible so that you never get a break, you never get a breather, you never get to just do your job efficiently.
Right.
Right.
Well, they want to use that expensive real estate too.
I was going to say that and the real estate.
They're wrapped up in that. Good.
That's wrapped up in it too. But that's a great point. I mean, remote work can be an accommodation for folks.
And it frequently is. I am a disabled organizer organizing in disabled community, and the number of people I know who have been able to finally transition to being able to support themselves in a career because they can work from home is significant.
It's huge.
Because those jobs finally became available.
Right.
Well, especially with prices for childcare and cars and stuff. With everything so expensive, it's extremely efficient if you can work from your house, if you don't have to rely on as much childcare, if you don't have to spend all this money trying to keep a car running.
Right.
Well, let's talk about that, right? In the context of affordable housing, if the closest you can afford to live to your job is an hour commute away, and you're losing 2 hours every day of your own personal time that you're not compensated for, right, in order to do this job that you could just be doing from home.
Right. I mean, as someone who drives from Athens to Huntsville all the time for work, that commute, which frankly is not even a bad commute, comparatively speaking, it wears on you. And, that time that is drained, that time you have to add into your schedule that, you're not being paid for. In fact, you're paying for it. You're paying for it in the maintenance of your car and in the gasoline you're putting in your car, and the insurance for your car, all that. So, I wanted to lift this up because, I think it's important that we recognize there are folks in our community who have disabilities who are valuable members of our society. And, if an employer needs to make an accommodation, like, make the accommodation.
And there are guidelines for what is considered reasonable, right? When an employee says, I am disabled and I require an accommodation, they enter into an iterative discussion process, right? There is a negotiation that happens there. There are guidelines that determine whether that request is reasonable or not, right? So it's not just employees asking for whatever and demanding that with no guidelines, no accountability.
Right. I mean, as we read from the Department of Labor here, they have the Job Accommodation Network. Like, literally, they have an entire Office of Disability Employment Policy. Employers are not out there by themselves. So, I mean, not that I think many employers listen to our program. They should. You're an interesting person if you do, and I appreciate you. But, employers can find resources out there to do this and to do it effectively.
And in fact, find money to pay for those accommodations.
Right.
Even when they do cost money, which, this report says most cost less than $300, which is, less than a week of pay in most cases.
Right.
And what's that worth to be able to retain that employee who has already been trained, who is already in the role?
Yeah.
What's the opportunity cost of letting that person go and having to fill that role?
Right. Yeah, I think so. So definitely wanted to put that information out there, and just wanted to think about folks with disabilities in our community and how important it is that they be able to work and participate fully in our community.
And you never know if you're going to join the disability population at some point.
Boy, that is true. Disability does not care about your age. It does not care about your race. It does not care about your gender or sexuality. It can happen to anyone. And all of us eventually are going to require care.
Right. Absolutely.
All of us eventually require care.
All of us require accommodations at some point in our life. And you're right. We all require care. We saw with COVID how many folks joined the ranks of the disabled because of long COVID and other issues. It's just, it's a very relevant topic for working people, I think. And our next story is a little different, a little interesting here, which is talking about weed and the Teamsters. Marijuana policy and the Teamsters Union. So I wanted to mention this alongside a couple other little things here kind of in this arena. But I did want to lift up this press release from the Teamsters, which they titled, Federal Legislation Needed to Bring Worker Protection to Nascent Cannabis Industry. The Teamsters are endorsing the Secure and Fair Enforcement Banking Act, or the SAFE Banking Act, which today got a hearing in the U.S. Senate Committee on Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs. The bipartisan legislation will protect workers and improve public safety by allowing legal cannabis businesses access to banking services. There are thousands of people working at cannabis proprietors in 38 states, including many who are our members, said Teamsters General President Sean O'Brien. These workers deserve a safe workplace that provides meaningful wages, health care, and access to retirement security. The SAFE Banking Act will allow these workers to engage in a meaningful partnership with their employer by removing archaic and nonsensical regulations that the industry is currently subjected to. And again, that's from Teamsters President Sean O'Brien. Without access to traditional banking services, legal cannabis businesses are forced to operate almost entirely in cash. This puts workers at risk of robbery and violence, enables wage theft, and makes it harder for public officials to enforce state and local regulations. Cannabis workers also often find it onerous to secure mortgages or access to basic banking because financial institutions are overly and unfairly cautious about the source of their income. The SAFE Banking Act will create a safer and more secure work environment for the cannabis industry, said Peter Finn, Teamsters Western Region International Vice President and Food Processing Division Director. It will bring one of our country's largest cash crops out of the shadows and into the mainstream, making it easier for the industry's many highly skilled workers to stay in this craft and build long-term prosperous careers. So, of course, the Teamsters, I really appreciate them putting out this press release and speaking up on this industry. They are representing more and more workers in the cannabis industry. And, of course, the Teamsters, the International Brotherhood of Teamsters, actually represents 1.2 million people in the U.S., Canada, and Puerto Rico. So shout out to the Teamsters for putting this out there, because there is a definite need for legalization done the right way. That means done safely, done in a way that does not leave people behind.
So that's something to talk about, actually, is these really onerous restrictions actually only encourage the black market to continue to exist. Even in places where it's been fully legalized recreationally, many places decide it's not worth the hassle. I'm already basically operating on the black market. Why do I need to get all of this licensure? Why do I need to be above board? What's the point in a storefront?
Right, which obviously...
Which then means there is less clean product coming out into the community, right?
Yes, and it also obviously means like less regulations to protect workers, right? Because as a worker in a legal workplace, you have certain rights. Doesn't mean they're always respected, but you have them. Not so much in the black market. And so there's a need to legalize marijuana. It's way past time for that to happen in this country, across this country, even here in states like Alabama. But there's a need to do it the right way, as opposed to reinforcing exploitative work conditions, which has been happening in some areas.
And also keeping the market closed to people most impacted.
Right, right. How about the folks who have been impacted by our racist, discriminatory, stupid marijuana laws? How about giving them first dibs on this industry, as opposed to big finance capital, which is coming in and has, really taken over the industry in a lot of places in this country. The old image of like hippie farmers doing this, that's not the case anymore.
It's venture capitalists.
Right, it's
now.
venture capitalists. It's not the hippie farmers. They've been kicked out of the business and priced out and gouged out. So
yeah, I'd love to see some of these people that have been incarcerated for marijuana crimes have the first dibs at being able to do these legally.
And not just first dibs in terms of like getting the required paperwork or permissions, but actual investment.
Right.
Oh,
These people have lost their lives, their time, their working ability to being incarcerated.
Let's repair some harm.
Yeah, let's repair some harm.
Let's repair some harm. Why not have worker co-ops as a key model inside the marijuana industry? I think that's another option too. Rather than these, hierarchical enterprises. And, there's a lot we could do to do it the right way.
Just imagine that $5.7 million investment.
Right. Yeah.
Right?
That
the
one
TJ
little
Maxx
city.
money.
That one little city for that one little strip mall.
Right. Right. What could you do with that? And so, the Safe Banking Act, like that's like bare minimum kind of reform that needs to happen. Like, yes, at the very least, we need to make sure that this industry, where it exists, is brought out into the open, that folks are not relying on cash only, that you have regular banking. So, workers are protected, so the businesses can operate soundly. And, we need more unions in the marijuana industry. I think that's something else that's really big, and I really appreciate the Teamsters for going after some of these workers and moving into that industry, because it is difficult under the current conditions because of the lack of the Safe Banking Act.
And big ups to the Teamsters for holding up like so much of the labor movement, man. They're all over the place with drivers and like everything.
Yeah, we love our Teamsters brothers and sisters. The Teamsters are definitely doing a lot of good work, and I'm excited to see what President Sean O'Brien is bringing with his administration. We'll see, how things go this summer with UPS negotiations. That's going to be the big news out of Teamsters, with the UPS contract expiring this summer. So, stay tuned on that for sure. But yeah, I really appreciate them and appreciate their work to bring some much needed reform to the marijuana industry. And, while we're on the subject of industry, we love to highlight bosses behaving badly on this show. Because oftentimes, on local news, if you tune in, think about how much of local news is mugshots and arrest reports, and often poor people, maybe innocent, maybe guilty, maybe it doesn't matter. They're going through a bad period in their life. They've been arrested, and that's what we highlight on local news, right? But how rare is it to get the counterbalance to that, where not just working people are shamed or spotlighted for their mistakes, but what about when bosses act bad? How about a little bit of accountability there? So we do like to highlight bosses behaving badly, and wanted to highlight this report out of Florida. The U.S. Department of Labor recovered more than $114,000 in back wages and damages for 100 employees who were denied overtime by an Orlando-based hotel staffing agency. Investigators with the department's Wage and Hour Division found that a Florida hotel staffing company failed to combine hours worked by 100 employees at several locations, paying them straight-time rates for all hours worked, including overtime hours. By doing so, the employer failed to pay the required time-and-a-half overtime premium for hours over 40 hours in a work week, which is a Fair Labor Standards Act violation. So in back wages and liquidated damages, they got $57,177 in back overtime wages and $57,177 in liquidated damages. And we do have a quote here from the Wage and Hour Division District Director. The hard work done by hospitality industry workers allows guests to enjoy their accommodations. Often they work long hours and deserve to be paid all their legally earned wages, including overtime. When employees work at more than one location, their employers must combine hours worked at all locations to calculate overtime wages properly. The Wage Hour Division is committed to safeguarding workers' rights to get paid their rightfully earned wages.
And y'all can correct me. It's not a criminal offense to steal wages, is
Correct.
it? It's all, yeah.
Correct.
So here you might have more insight on that.
So you are breaking the law when you do that, but there are not criminal penalties for wage theft, unfortunately. I mean, sometimes you could get into RICO cases or because inevitably if an employer is stealing wages, they're almost always doing other shady financial things.
Right, yeah,
right?
yeah.
Committing wire fraud, for example, or bouncing checks intentionally.
Right.
There's almost always other bad behavior attached, but wage theft by itself is not actually a crime. Even though wage theft completely outstrips all other forms of property theft, which are criminalized.
Right, absolutely. And that's exactly what I was going to say, that, wage theft is a massive problem in this country, but you wouldn't know it from listening to mainstream media who wants to scare you about crime waves. They want to scare you about shoplifting at Walgreens. And you're supposed to be terrified that there are shoplifters at the local Walgreens. But there is wage theft. Far
outranking. And there's nowhere
it.
to report that. There's nobody to help you with that. You just have to be brave enough to ask the questions and push for your rights.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, if you're in that situation where you believe you're being denied overtime pay or you're experiencing wage theft, absolutely document. Gather as much evidence as you possibly can. Find anything you can in writing that supports your case. Send
Always
emails.
keep copies of your pay stubs.
Keep copies of your pay stubs. Absolutely. Email can be very helpful in building a paper trail. And, once you feel like you have a pretty good bit of evidence to back you up, you should talk to the Wage and Hour Division of the Department of Labor. And I know that's a scary thing, and it's a risky thing in an at-will employment state such as Alabama. But you absolutely should be paid what you're supposed to be paid. And it's just egregious that so many employers out there commit wage theft and get away with it. So I did want to make sure we mention that the Fair Labor Standards Act requires that most employees in the U.S. be paid at least the federal minimum wage for all hours worked and overtime pay at not less than time and one half the regular rate of pay for all hours worked over 40 in a work week. So you can go to the Wage and Hour Division and find more information about this. Again, whether you're an employee or an employer, they try to make it easy for you as an employer to not break the law.
Mm-hmm.
They even have an app. They have a new timesheet app for Android devices. Now, I can't tell you exactly what that app does, but hey, I'm glad the Department of Labor has an app. I'm glad they're doing that because the more we can educate people about their rights and how to exercise their rights and protect their rights, I think the better we all are. So, Ben, I'm going to guess we never heard from AFGE, right?
I have not.
Okay,
them,
cool.
no.
I just wanted to check in. Maybe we had
Catch
some
them next
miscommunication
time,
or something. That's okay. That's totally fine. We've got just a couple of final stories here, and we're going to wrap it up. I did want to mention some big news out of Los Angeles. There has been a historic victory among striking, organizing strippers in Los Angeles. Kim Kelly has a great article out, as does In These Times. Both of them have done good work covering this. So, Star Garden dancers in Los Angeles are now the only unionized strippers in the United States.
Unionized sex workers.
Wow.
Oh,
yeah. I guess
not just strippers, but
right.
unionized sex workers.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's huge. That's huge, and I believe they won their election
Unanimously is what I read.
unanimously without any opposition. It was a 15-month effort. And so the strippers of Star Garden's Topless Dive Bar in North Hollywood, California, have achieved their goal of union recognition. And their union is Actors Equity. And so that could be a big win for Actors Equity in terms of breaking into that industry as well. Because when one group of workers organizes, other groups of workers always follow.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so I think this news is going to spread like wildfire among exotic dancers, strippers, sex workers of all kinds and all stripes. I think this is going to be big news. And I really think that's so cool that they have done this.
And that they band together. In a lot of cases, exotic dancers are actually not employees of the clubs that they dance at. They are 1099 employees, so they have to pay a cover charge just to get in and work. And then they are able to keep a portion of all of their tips. There is usually a requirement that they split their tips with other employees of the club, like the DJ.
Right.
And so if you don't tip out the DJ and tip the DJ well, you'd never know if you're going to get the songs you need.
Right. It's just so, there's so many sketchy things that happen in that industry, just from the little bit I've read. And so, if ever there were some workers that needed the collective organization and needed protection
for sure.
of a union.
And that solidarity, right?
Of
being
sticking
part of a
together.
group.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because I can imagine, especially, in a 1099 contractor kind of situation where it's probably really competitive and there's probably a lot of division that the bosses try to stir within the workforce. So I think that's just, fantastic that these workers were able to do it. The owners did finally withdraw all their election challenges, which means that the union has been recognized, and within 30 days, we'll have to meet. So Star Garden will have to meet with Actors Equity within 30 days to negotiate a first contract. The dancers were reinstated. So that's worth noting too. Always love to see workers put back to work after being illegally taken out of work in retaliation. So yeah, it took 15 months, but it's really, really cool, really great news to see this. I've been intrigued by, I posted the In These Times article on my Facebook, and I've been kind of intrigued by the folks responding to it and reacting to it. It's a pretty eclectic mix of people. Because I think it speaks to an eclectic mix of people. There are people who have, more familiarity with this industry. And then there are folks who can just imagine like how difficult it must be to work under those conditions and how important it must be to stick up for one another and protect one another and to build a union.
I'm really excited to see what they do next. So
Yeah.
they're not actually the first unionized strip club.
Right.
The first unionized strip club was actually the Lusty Lady based in Seattle. And they actually decided to unionize. And then they became a workers' co-op. They actually bought out the club.
Okay.
And now they are employee owned and operated.
I was not aware of that. I did know that Star Garden wasn't the first like ever. But they are the only ones, I guess,
But
now.
they're now currently the only unionized
Right,
shop
but-
because the Lusty Lady is a workers' co-op.
Right.
That's even better.
That
I love
yeah,
it.
really.
So, like-
that's really cool. I did not know that.
I'll be really interested to see where they go next.
Me too.
I just think about like my old high school job working at Walgreens and how different it would have been if I had like actual, skin in the game with the profits of the company, and how like I probably wouldn't have had 3 assistant managers and 1 manager and me being the only clerk on the floor. I feel like it would be a much more like we're all in it together, y'all.
Equitable.
Yeah.
Yeah,
absolutely.
all those.
Absolutely. So yeah, I mean, we'll see what happens with the contract negotiations. I think it could set a precedent for the industry. And like I said, I think there will be, strippers all over the country who hear about this and are hopefully going to have conversations.
If there's anybody at the Pink Pony who wants to come talk to us, please do.
Yeah.
Sure.
Have some organizing conversations.
Yeah.
Maybe I should not go there to have that organizing conversation.
Yeah.
Just,
Well, maybe
Just meet
that's
at
how
the
we
coffee
open
shop.
the door. We can go do like a board meeting there.
That's right. Yeah.
You just have to clear it with your wife first and everything.
Right. Yeah. Should probably do that. Yes.
Organizing only.
Right.
middle of the
It's
day.
all
Sorry, Boo.
professional.
I was having my one-on-ones and my follow-ups and building my list and committee. Yeah.
Making sure they're adequately supported.
Absolutely. So, yes, solidarity with the strippers in Los Angeles. Way to go. Really,
Yeah.
we want to celebrate your union win. That's awesome.
Congratulations.
Yeah. So, on the subject of Kim Kelly, I did want to mention that she's got a new article out in The Nation, her May Day Paris Dispatch. And I really can't recommend that enough. I really just found it a well-written article. Not surprised. Kim Kelly is a great writer. It was a very well-written article, but she was actually in Paris on May Day, and so she got an up-close and personal view of the riot police there in Paris. Their May Day was quite rowdy, I guess you could say.
As is tradition.
As is tradition in Paris. They're not a big fan of the oligarchs there, and they're willing to stand up and demonstrate about that. And of course, this comes on the heels of President Macron, the neoliberal, who has raised the retirement age in France against the wishes of the people, and has used every trick in the book to get it passed.
And essentially against the normal procedures of Parliament.
Right. That's my understanding. Is like every little trick he could pull out to try to get this through and shove this through. That's what they've done. Which indicates that obviously there's not broad popular support for this, even within the government itself, much less the people. And so, yeah, it's a shame to see anytime our fellow workers anywhere move backwards. And this is a step backwards for France. But, I think the article that Kim wrote really highlighted that there's a spirit of resistance that is alive and well in Paris. And we'll see where that leads and what that turns into. The unions were very vocal and out in full force against this reform by Macron. They were out in full force on May Day. So we'll see. But I am an internationalist. I believe that workers of the world have more in common than we have differences, and so I think what happens to workers in France, is important to us over here in the United States, and vice versa. So yeah, definitely recommend Kim Kelly's new article, her May Day Paris Dispatch. And before we wrap up, I just wanted to ask if we had anything to say more about the Alabama Democratic Party. I am working on an article with some activist reactions to the party and its decision to eliminate the youth, LGBTQ, and disabled caucuses, among other caucuses. I believe the Native American caucus, the Hispanic caucus as well, Asian and Pacific Islander caucus. So there's been a lot of discussion happening in Alabama progressive circles about this. And I am working on a piece with some great activist reactions from both sides. I will give you that. I spoke to someone who is actually happy with this. Don't agree with her, but asked her opinion. So yeah, I don't know if y'all had anything you wanted to add on that. Chime in before we wrapped up.
Man, I'm just tired.
Yeah.
It just makes me tired. It just makes me so tired that we went through this process once and instituted those caucuses specifically because ADP was not in alignment with bylaw guidelines established by the Democratic National Convention.
Right.
Right? So we've already been through it. We've already had the activists who say we need representation at the table. Right? And we're going to do things the right way. We're going to go through the courts. We're going to organize. We're going to negotiate. We're going to come in good faith. And to have the rug ripped out again.
Right.
It's like, what's even the point?
Yeah, there's a lot of people asking that. And I know I heard from some folks that are planning a forum, like a town hall, to actually just kind of bring that up. Like, what do we do next? Where do we go from here? What should our relationship be with the Alabama Democratic Party? Because it appears to be a party that wants nothing to do with quite a lot of us.
It appears to be a party that actually wants nothing to do with the DNC.
Or victory.
Or victory, for sure.
That's for damn sure.
I don't think there's any interest in actually operating as a state party at this point.
Yeah.
We can't even field candidates for half of the open positions.
They can't even send emails or press releases.
That's what I was going to say. I was like, and this after the diminishment of the party to such a severe degree, like...
Yeah.
Like, it's not like the Democratic Party's in a thriving shape or anything. No one will dispute that. And it's like to break it up even more and have more infighting
on the ballot. And I'm not endorsing any specific party one way or the other, but the fact is, libertarians, even though they got a much smaller portion of the vote, even though they have much less funding overall across the state, they actually managed to field more candidates than Democrats in the last Alabama election.
And isn't that embarrassing? If you're Joe Reed, right? If you're Randy Kelly, shouldn't you be embarrassed by that? I would be.
Who have fewer people and have less money can get more people on the ballot.
And now, I'm just going to come right out and say this. There are people who would think that I am being discriminatory by even suggesting such a thing. That they should be embarrassed by those poor results. And I can tell you, it has nothing to do with that. Just look at the last decade and tell me, has the Alabama Democratic Party been relevant? Has it been viable? Has it been functional? Has it been competitive?
Has it had a working website?
Can they tweet?
For some of the time.
Can they email?
And it wasn't always like this.
Right.
There was a time when, the Democratic Party of Alabama actually had some legs under it.
Yeah, at one time it was the party in the state, right? And now you can say it was a little different ideologically, and it was because Alabama's long been dominated by the right wing, whether they called themselves Democrats or Republicans. Many of the Republicans today were Democrats, 20 years ago. But you're right, and it's not that hard to do some of this bare minimum level of competence that folks are asking for. I get that the Alabama Democratic Party is not going to do and say all the things that I want. I recognize that. I know who I am and what I'm about, and I know what they are and what they're about. I recognize we're going to have some differences now. But I don't think it's asking a lot to be competent. I don't think it's asking a lot to at least try to send an email every now and then, to at least, do some work.
There's something else I want to say, just to say this. I feel like Joe Reed has characterized these caucuses as being all or even majority white caucuses,
Correct.
right? But all of those caucuses had black and brown people in them, were chaired by black and brown people.
Absolutely.
Right? Because people are not a monolith. You don't just have one identity and that's what you stick to, right? You can be black and queer. You can be black, queer, and disabled. In fact, I know a lot of people who fit that description.
Right.
And I really am offended that Joe Reed looks at these caucuses as somehow disempowering the black vote.
Right. And, also on that subject of, people are not a monolith. Black folks aren't a monolith. And
Certainly.
I think, it's a mistake to assume that somehow Dr. Joe Reed and the ADC and Randy Kelly are like the end-all be-all for black political representation in the state, or black political opinions for that matter. Again, I'm just a straight white guy born and raised in the South. I'm just a country boy who read some books. But
and we love you, Adam.
Well, I appreciate that. And the thing about it is, if I were any other identity, I would still be asking the same questions of, so when's the last time you won an election? So what are you doing for me in Montgomery? What are you running on? What's your platform? How are you going to help me as a working class person? How are you trying to make my life better? How are you trying to make Alabama a better place for us? Those are fair questions to ask of the ADC and the ADP. Whether you like who it's coming from or not, right? I think that we're going to have more conversations about that, I'm sure, moving forward. And I look forward to some of the town halls and other stuff that activists are planning, because I know there's a lot of folks out there having these conversations about, what should we do moving forward? Because we can't just sit back and hope that ADP gets it together to build some kind of competent opposition to the right wing in the state.
Magically with, less than a year to go.
Right, yeah. Obviously, we see what that's about. And I think many of us have plenty of reasons to be skeptical of the DNC. And I'm just going to tell you, to the liberals out there who think the DNC is going to come in and save Alabama, bless your sweet little hearts.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
That's a strange illusion to have these days.
It is.
In my opinion.
Right. I think it is too, because for one thing, they don't give a damn about us, because what do we provide for them?
Well, it's obviously they need to grow the base of the party and include more people. Whether that means, and I wouldn't like this, but more conservative people or more liberal people, they need more people.
Certainly
but this
more
is
youth.
definitely not the way to go about it.
Yeah, I got some criticism for some comments I made about it, because I said, it seems like Joe Reed and Randy Kelly want a party that is pretty much church-going black folks over the age of 60, of a particular moderate to conservative politics.
And nobody is suggesting that faction doesn't deserve representation
Absolutely
or a seat
not.
at the table.
They're a part of the coalition, and that is perfectly fine. Like, that's good. They should be part of the coalition.
They should be part of the conversation.
A coalition is made of many parts.
But for the last 50 years, Joe Reed has been able to handpick members of the executive committee.
Right. And so if you are realistic about being a political party and being a political leader, the idea is eventually you want to win, and you win by math. And there just aren't enough church attending, moderate politics, black folks 60 years and up to win many elections in Alabama. I love them. I want them as part of my coalition. But they alone cannot win much in Alabama. And from the outside looking in, what is Dr. Reed doing to expand a coalition that can actually fight the Republicans?
And that reflects what Alabama needs.
Right.
Right?
And reflects the full diversity of our state. Right? Because not everyone goes to church. Not everyone's over the age of 60. Okay? And not everyone is being represented in this state. In fact, I would argue most people in the state are not currently being represented by politics.
Yeah, if you just look at how many people vote in general, you'll see that it's mostly minority rule around here.
Well, also look at how the districts are drawn, right? Look at who else is attached to your neighborhood, and is that, actually representative of the places where you operate in your day-to-day life?
Right. And see, again, if we had effective opposition, we could be doing more to fight this kind of gerrymandering and the way these districts are drawn and all that. But, for the last decade, the Alabama Democrats have been an afterthought. The Republicans have had a supermajority. They control all three branches of government. The only thing that ever slows them down is when they argue amongst themselves.
Truly.
And I'm sorry, but I can't.
Or when there is widespread, large-scale citizens organizing.
Yes.
Right?
That is the only alternative.
That never comes from the party.
No.
I say that as an organizer who is working on those issues. That support never comes from the party.
Right. And we've talked at length here on this show about the lack of support for labor. And, I got some pushback because I called out the Democrats for not supporting labor. And was told, well, of course they're supporting labor. You're just not looking hard enough. That's what I was told.
Just need better glasses or something.
I just need better glasses, man. I'm just not looking hard enough. Which, I'm sorry, but I'm a pretty committed labor guy.
Yeah. Well, I think most of our
I can't find it.
Yeah, you do a lot of that work.
I mean,
I will
it ain't
that.
Right. It's not that I'm not looking for it, right? So if I can't find it, that's your problem, not my problem, not labor's problem. Y'all are the ones wanting votes.
And I think to point out that most of our viewers, and I think most people are workers. They live under. They're not millionaires. You don't have $1 million to dump into a super PAC.
Right.
Everybody's listening to this. I highly doubt we have a ton of millionaires in the audience. But that means that you have to represent yourself still, and that may be hitting the pavement or getting involved in some other way, rather than because we're not going to win with the billions of dollars.
Right. Yeah, we have people power. We
Yep.
have people power. That's the only thing that we have. We can't sit back and hope that Democrats in Montgomery or in Washington fix it for us. We can't hope that the Republicans fight each other enough to distract themselves to keep them from hurting us. We can't rest our hopes on that. We have people power. And so that's...
Just look at what happened in Montgomery this past Tuesday, right?
Yeah.
That was, almost 300 people, I think, showed up.
Right. That was a remarkable display of solidarity and people power there. And, I think...
And it wasn't like the party was, sponsoring buses or gas carts for people to get to Montgomery.
No. People did that because they wanted to. And with no help from the Alabama Democratic Party. And that's the thing. And, that's, I guess, my closing words on this is just that I know that there are a lot of good people in this state who are doing good work, people who are justice-minded, people who are community-minded, whatever arena you're working in, whether it's labor or social justice issues, criminal justice issues, whatever the issue may be. There are good people out there doing good work, trying to make this a better Alabama for all people. And so I encourage you to keep that going. And we all have to keep talking with each other and working together and building a stronger people's movement that can fill in this void, because we deserve better. We deserve better in the state of Alabama. We deserve representation that truly reflects working people here.
And we deserve leadership that is facilitating our participation.
Absolutely.
Right? We should have leadership that wants us to be involved, that is making opportunities for us to get involved, that is supporting us when we are using our voice. Not actually criticizing us and saying you should keep your mouth shut and don't be too loud.
Right. Again, the name of the game is addition and multiplication, not subtraction and division. Just going to leave it there,
man,
folks.
that's elementary.
We're just going to go elementary. Mathematical with it.
It's that teacher power going there.
That's right. So, folks, we're gonna wrap it up today. Hope y'all enjoyed it. It was a little different episode. Jacob should be back next week, and it'll be back to your regularly scheduled programming, so to speak. But really appreciate Ben and Tahira joining me today. It's been fun. I hope y'all have enjoyed it. We've talked some Alabama politics. We've talked local politics, Department of Labor, strippers, marijuana, an eclectic mix of topics today. So yeah, I hope y'all enjoyed it. I just want to encourage y'all to stay tuned to our website, tvlr.fm. You can find some of our articles there, including some of my thoughts about the Alabama Democratic Party and political engagement in the state that I published a couple weeks ago, if you want to check that out. And also wanted to remind folks about the event in Birmingham that is happening on Tuesday, the 23rd at the Birmingham Civil Rights Institute. Again, this is from 5 to 7 p.m., and it is for the nurses, National Nurses United, AFL-CIO, and other organizations. I believe Alabama Rise is involved. A lot of good organizations are involved in putting together that community town hall on worker organizing and healthcare justice. So definitely wanted to lift that up. And finally, if you are so inclined, you can check out our store at tvlr.fm/store, or of course you can donate at tvlr.fm/donate. We really appreciate all of you who listen, all of you who do like and subscribe and review us, and all of you who, of course, donate, because without our donations and without our sponsors, we could not do this program. So we really do appreciate it. And if you appreciate and value independent working class media in the South, media that is by working people and for working people, definitely consider chipping in a couple bucks. Tell your friends about us, share it on social media, however you can help. It means a lot to us. And with that, I'm going to end it. Ben and Tahira, do y'all have any final words?
Thanks for having me. I've had a great time appearing, and I will not be a stranger.
Don't be, for sure.
The same for me. I appreciate being up here. And all you lovely commenters and some of the people that are new that joined us today. Thanks again. Just tell somebody about us. That helps so much.
I'm going to give a special shout out actually to Ben, because he helped us with the sound last Sunday. So thanks for being a pal and really showing up for the movement.
Hey, and big ups. There's so many young people at that rally. That's what really made me happy to see. Just like a lot of youth and, man, the next generation. Like, good big ups to them.
Absolutely. Yeah. Love to end it on good news. So way to go, young people. Way to go. Way to go, the good folks who are showing up for our community.
We're pro young people. We're taking
absolutely
dangerous stances up here, y'all.
Yeah.
That's right. The youth, we're for them, not against them. So, we appreciate everybody listening. Y'all have a great weekend, and all power to the workers.
Solidarity, y'all.
Solidarity.